Chapter 45-39. With a sneer, the West Mountain Elder's signature black mist appeared above Lin Yi's head like a shadow, but this time, he wouldn't use the soul hook hand. A horrifying bone claw reached out from the black mist. It wasn't a human, but it wasn't a beast. It looked like it was made out of human and beast bones, and the killing intent it exuded was something Lin Yi had never seen before in his life. Bang! With a horrifying whistling sound, the bone claw instantly streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. With lightning speed, it went straight for Lin Yi's head, vowing to crush him with one claw. Before the bone claw arrived, the terrifying killing intent it exuded was already too much for Lin Yi to bear. The spirit bird he was sitting on could not even move its wings as it fell straight down. Explode! Fortunately, Lin Yi was already prepared for this. At the critical moment, he hurriedly condensed a super bomb in his hand. It just happened to meet the ferocious bone claw above his head. Boom! A loud noise suddenly resounded through the entire Wei Arc Sea. Tsunamis suddenly rose and the weather changed. Everyone in Wei Arc City showed a look of horror at the same time. Those people in Devil Ling City were already familiar with this destructive sound, but it was the first time they experienced it. At the edge of the air wave, the spirit bird rushed out with Lin Yi, desperately flapping its wings to escape. At the moment, at the center of the explosion, although the bone claw was caught off guard and suffered a fierce blow, it only paused for a moment. It was not damaged at all. Jia, with this little strength, you want to plot against me? What a fantasy. West Mountain Old Master sneered as he retracted the bone claw. Lin Yi's super bomb was enough to kill a high-level nascent soul stage master. Even if a profound ascending stage master was caught off guard, he would still have a long way to go if he wanted to deal with West Mountain Old Master. Listening to the laughter of West Mountain Old Master behind him, Lin Yi's heart could not help but tremble. Although the time he condensed this time was very short, the super bomb was after all his last trump card. Even the violent Fire Thousand Bursts fist did not have such power. But even so, there was nothing they could do to the West Mountain Old Master. Lin Yi's timing just now could not be said to be bad, but his strongest killing move still could not hurt his opponent at all. He only barely interrupted his opponent's attack, and that was all. The disparity between the two of them was really despairing and speechless. Hurry up and run. If that crooked path catches up to you before we reach the 5 Poisons Swamp, you're dead for sure. The ghostly thing urged in his mind. Needless to say, Lin Yi shook his head with a bitter smile. He would run to the South Island desperately even if the ghost didn't urge him. Besides, this time was much more dangerous than last time. Last time, the West Mountain Elder Master wanted to refine him into a trump card puppet and didn't dare to hurt his body easily. But this time, he didn't have such scruples. He used a killing move from the get-go. The super bomb could barely block it once, but it definitely couldn't block it a second time. However, knowing that the other party could use their divine sense to lock onto them and follow them like a shadow, how was it possible to rely on the speed of the spirit bird to get rid of the other party? Don't worry, as long as you can get rid of that crooked path with absolute speed, you don't have to worry about his sudden arrival. He can't use his divine sense to lock onto you anymore. The ghostly thing suddenly laughed. Ah. But I didn't use the swamp mud? Lin Yi was stunned. I'm here, you don't need to use the swamp mud. The ghostly thing said angrily. Although the West Mountain Old Master was arrogant, if he was at his peak, he was just a good-for-nothing in front of the former Azure Dragon. In front of the former Azure Dragon, he was nothing more than a piece of trash. Even though he had fallen to such a miserable state, it was still a piece of cake for him to stop the other party's divine sense from locking onto him. Lin Yi just remembered that the ghostly thing was a primordial spirit Grand Master. In terms of the use of divine sense, he was at least 10 streets ahead of the West Mountain Old Master. But then he smiled bitterly and said, if you knew this, why didn't you make a move last time? I thought I was dead for sure several times. Last time, this guy didn't directly use a killing move. Why would I make a move rashly? The ghostly thing curled its lips disapprovingly and said, "Boy, you have to remember, every time I make a move, there will be an increased risk of being seen through by others. Once people know that I'm on you, then the two of us will really not have a good life anymore." "I'll remember." Lin Yi nodded in a deep voice, and immediately did not say anything more. He urged the spirit bird to fly quickly to the 5-poisoned swamp. At the same time, the West Mountain Old Master, who was shrouded in the black mist, laughed grimly. He habitually wanted to descend on the top of Lin Yi's head, but after a while, he found that he didn't even move a fart at all. He was still suspended in the original position. Huh. The West Mountain Old Master frowned and subconsciously wanted to redetermine the position of Lin Yi, but then his face suddenly changed. Lin Yi had actually disappeared from his divine sense. Not only that, even the spirit bird had disappeared with him. Wasn't this the same as seeing a ghost? In such good weather, not to mention within a radius of 5 miles, even a blade of grass and a tree within a radius of 100 miles could not escape the West Mountain Old Master's divine sense. But for some reason, the breath of Lin Yi in the spirit bird had indeed disappeared. This strange and evil feeling seemed to have been erased out of thin air by some kind of exquisite method. Such a method was something that even the West Mountain Old Sect Master had to admit was absolutely impossible to achieve. It was simply incredible. "Why, Ling Chen, don't think that you can escape like this. Today, I will kill you." The West Mountain Old Master suddenly flew into a rage, but he quickly calmed down. His eyes focused, and he looked into the distance. Then, the black mist suddenly shot out a powerful stream of vital energy, and his whole body shot out like an arrow toward the direction in which Lin Yi had escaped. After all, he was a great evil cultivator of the mountain opening period. If the West Mountain Old Master really burst out with speed, it would be no small matter. Especially now that he was consuming vital energy without caring about the cost, his flying speed was even faster than the spirit bird. Seeing the black dot behind him getting closer and closer, Lin Yi, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, was once again faced with a great enemy. He had already overestimated the strength of the West Mountain Old Master, but he didn't expect the other party to be able to catch up with him. He flew even faster than the spirit bird. Was this guy even human? Faster, faster. At this time, Lin Yi pinned all his hopes of survival on the spirit bird. Now that the ghost thing had made it impossible for the other party to follow him like a shadow, if he still couldn't escape, then he could only say that this was his fate. Chapter 45-40. Senior, are we going to enter the forest of the South Island from the previous transmitting formation? Or are we going to fly there directly? Lin Yi asked quickly. It took some time to prepare to start the transmitting formation, and the Elder of West Mountain was likely to catch up with them. However, if they flew there directly, they would be easily targeted by nearby spirit beasts. No matter what choice they made, they had to take the risk in order to survive. That transmitting formation is a one-way transmitting formation. You can only go out, but not in, the ghost answered. What? Damn it. How can I escape to the South Island? Senior, you're kidding me. I'm going to die. Lin Yi was shocked. This was the only way to get rid of the Elder of West Mountain in his eyes. How could it be a one-way transmitting formation? As for the other option of flying directly into the forest of the South Island, it was not feasible at all in his opinion. First, it was impossible to avoid those extremely dangerous spirit beasts. Second, even if there was a way to avoid them, they could not get rid of the Elder of West Mountain, who was faster than them. Wrong. Who told you that we flew here to enter the South Island? Do you think the South Island is your backyard, and you can enter whenever you want? Have you forgotten the pain you suffered before? The ghost smiled calmly and curled its lips. But what should I do if I don't enter the South Island? Are you going to scare the old monster away like last time? Lin Yi's eyes lit up, but then he denied it. No, this kind of thing can't be done again. The Elder of West Mountain is not a fool. How can he be fooled twice in a row? Of course, although he is a crooked person, he is not a retarded child. How can he be fooled twice in such a short time? If even the second in command is this kind of person, the West Mountain Crooked sect would have been wiped out long ago. The ghost said. Retarded child. Lin Yi could not help complaining in his heart. It seemed that this trip to the secular world was not in vain. Not only did it end up in such a miserable situation, but it also learned modern vocabulary. The reason why I let you escape here is not to let you escape to the South Island, nor to bluff to scare away this crooked Taoist. But there's something here that can save your life. I'm sure this monster of West Mountain can't do anything about it. Seeing the elder of West Mountain getting closer and closer, the ghost was confident and did not panic at all. Even West Mountain Old Master can't do anything about it? Could it be that your friend is here? Lin Yi's spirit was suddenly refreshed. If it was before, he might not believe that there was a spirit beast that could stop a giant evil cultivator at the mountain opening period, but after seeing the scene at the spirit beast convention last time, he had already seen the powerful foundation of the spirit beast clan. With the level of this ghost, if it really found a friend, it should not be a problem to deal with the West Mountain Elder. No, I don't have many friends. Even if I did, they are not in the South Island now. The ghostly thing's reply caused Lin Yi's heart to sink, and the next sentence shocked Lin Yi even more. If you want to escape the pursuit of that crooked path, you must enter the 5 poison swamp. What? Senior, didn't you say that the 5 poison swamp's 5 elements kill each other? No matter who enters, they will die without a doubt. Lin Yi said in shock. That's right. That's why you have to use all of your true chi to protect yourself and this spirit bird as much as possible. You just have to fly all the way down. The ghostly thing pointed out. That works too. Won't I die without a doubt? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised and suspicious. When talking about the 5 poison swamp before, even the ghostly thing had a lingering fear in its tone, and vowed that even the old master of West Mountain was helpless. But now it asked him to jump down with the spirit bird. Wasn't it courting death? If he had known that he would die anyway, he might as well stay and fight with the old master of West Mountain. Why did he deliberately escape here and choose such a strange grave for himself? It was really superfluous. It was better to be buried in the sea, at least it would be cleaner. You can rest assured about this. If it were someone else, they would die without a doubt, but you, boy, probably won't die. The ghostly thing laughed. Senior, don't joke. If this 5 poison swamp can make a giant evil cultivator at the opening period helpless, how can I have the ability to jump down and not die? Lin Yi said with a wry smile. He had always been very confident, but he would never be overconfident. This kind of thing was unrealistic no matter how he thought about it. If you die, I will inevitably be unlucky. Do you think I will joke about this kind of thing? Although the ghostly thing didn't have a physical form, its tone showed what was called curling its lips. When the Heaven Stage Island was opened, you didn't even die under the pressure of the 5 elements attack. What's more, you are now at the peak of the middle stage of Gold Core Realm. Your strength is no longer what it used to be. How can you die in this trivial 5 poison swamp? Yes. Lin Yi's eyes suddenly lit up. The horror of the 5 poison swamp was the killing of the 5 elements. The 5 elements of heaven and earth circulated endlessly. Even the strongest master couldn't bear it, but he was different. He had the attribute of the 5 elements. Why would he be afraid of the 5 elements attack? Seeing that the old master of West Mountain was already in front of him, the ferocious bone claw and the black fog appeared again, and the dense evil chi, which was almost substantial, was overwhelming. Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate a little. He quickly followed the ghostly thing's instructions and used his genuine chi to protect himself and the spirit bird. Without saying anything, he rushed into the 5 poison swamp. Gulp. 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 Watching Lin Yi and the spirit bird sink into the 5 poison swamp in an instant, leaving only a series of terrible bubbles, the old master of West Mountain was dumbfounded. He had been chasing too fast and too fiercely all the way. He almost didn't have time to stop and rushed into the swamp. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he used all his genuine chi to barely stop his body. However, the old master of West Mountain was lucky to not fall into the 5-poison swamp. The ferocious bone claw that he had condensed did not stop in time. It was almost close to Lin Yi's back and the claw went in. Chi! An ear-piercing sound instantly tore through the sky and broke the silence in an area of a few hundred kilometers. At the same time, the 5-colored mud that was soaked in the bone claw suddenly exploded, and the great power contained within it actually caused the entire world to pale in comparison. The bone claw, which had not been damaged in the face of Lin Yi's super bomb before, just after coming into contact with the mud, broke into pieces like broken rock weathering. Then, it was swallowed by the 5-poison swamp below, not even leaving a trace of bone residue. The old master of West Mountain suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This was a sign that he had suffered a serious backlash. The ferocious bone claw was a killing weapon that he had spent countless efforts to condense. It was absolutely indestructible, and its strength was no less than any divine weapon. Lin Yi's super bomb was a good proof. R1152. Chapter 45-41. This was one of the trump cards of the West Mountain sect's evil cultivators. However, before this extremely ugly 5-poison swamp, it collapsed upon contact and was completely unable to withstand a single blow. Such a horrifying scene, even the West Mountain Old Master couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. His originally strange face suddenly became pale without any color, and his heart was extremely frightened. Novel, this, is the legendary 5-poison swamp? The West Mountain Elder hurriedly flew into the air with a lingering fear in his heart, and only stopped after retreating for a few miles. He was afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of the bone claw, and be swallowed by this ugly swamp without leaving a trace. Because very few human cultivators came to this place, there were not many people in the South Continent Sea who knew about the 5-poison swamp. However, the West Mountain Old Master was obviously a master who knew his stuff. Even if he didn't recognize it at first glance, if he still couldn't react after suffering such a big loss, then he would really be unworthy of his title as a big evil cultivator. After all, masters at the level of the West Mountain Old Master were often people who cherished their lives. They could be unfamiliar with any place or environment, but they must be familiar with those things that could pose a fatal threat to them. Just like the 5-poison swamp in front of them. Cultivators kept saying that they could go against the heavens and change their fate, but in fact, the higher the level, the more they were in awe of the power of heaven and earth. Because the stronger they were, the more they knew how small they were, and the more they knew the vastness and terror of heaven and earth. Fighting against the power of heaven and earth with the power of one person was a realm that many people dreamed of. Unfortunately, this would always be a beautiful fantasy. In fact, such a possibility would never exist. Any place that showed the power of heaven and earth was an absolutely dangerous and forbidden place for cultivators. No matter how strong one was, whether it was the mysterious ascending stage, the mountain opening stage, or even stronger, it was useless. If one wanted to go against the heavens in these places, there would always be one end, and that was death. No matter from which point of view, the 5-poison swamp in front of them completely met the definition of a dangerous place. Not to mention that the West Mountain Old Master had accidentally been cheated until his face was bleeding. Even if he had successfully stopped the bone claw just now, he would absolutely not dare to go near the 5-poison swamp. Why. Sinister Jr., before you die, you actually want to drag this sect down with you. Truly vicious to the extreme. The West Mountain Elder finally managed to heave a sigh of relief from his internal injuries. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and cursed. In his opinion, Lin Yi must have known that he was going to die, so he wanted to drag him down with him. At this moment, the West Mountain Elder's heart was filled with shock and fear. He sighed in his heart. Fortunately, he was careful enough and stopped in time. That was why he was lucky enough to escape. Otherwise, if he had really rushed in with Lin Yi without hesitation, it would have been useless no matter how strong he was. Even his indestructible bone claws could not withstand the five elements' attack, let alone his own flesh and blood body. At that time, he would definitely die together with this little bastard. Moreover, his body would be smashed into pieces and his soul would scatter. He would be deader than dead. A few miles away, the West Mountain Elder looked at the five-poisoned swamp in front of him with a changing expression. He knew that this time, Lin Yi would not be able to come out alive. After all, this was different from the last time. Although the South Island forest was also extremely dangerous, if one was extremely lucky, there would be a chance of survival in the end. However, once one fell into the five-poisoned swamp in front of him, death was not a matter of probability, but a matter of certainty. There could not be any accidents, unless the world had gone mad. Bah! Death cannot wipe out all his crimes. He deserves to die without a corpse. The West Mountain Elder spat at the place where Lin Yi fell. Although he did not kill Lin Yi with his own hands, he died anyway. This time, his goal was finally achieved, and he did not end up with a dirty face like last time. The only thing that made the West Mountain Elder feel a little regretful was that Lin Yi did not even leave a bone residue, let alone a complete corpse. It was rare to encounter a good material that might be used to refine a trump card puppet, but he missed it. It would be a lie to say that it was not a pity. It could only be said that it was God's will. Although this place was very remote, it was the territory of the South Island after all. After the last bloody lesson, the old master of West Mountain did not dare to stay here for a long time, for fear of attracting the attention of some powerful spirit beasts. After cursing, he immediately turned around and left. The West Mountain Elder would never have thought that Lin Yi, who he thought must have died without a corpse, not only did he not die under the five elements attack of the swamp, but also had no injuries on his body. Not only that, but even the spirit bird was the same. His whole body was tightly protected with genuine qi. Since entering the five-poisoned swamp, Lin Yi and the spirit bird had been falling rapidly. This process lasted for a long time, and it felt like the bottom could not be seen. Although this process was long and boring, it was not easy at all. The extremely strong five elements killing intent was hovering in all directions. Even though Lin Yi was wrapped in his genuine qi, he could clearly feel it. Thinking of the scene where the West Mountain Elder's bone claw was easily strangled by the five elements killing intent, the horror of the scene in front of him was really chilling. If it were other people, including the West Mountain Elder, who was an evil cultivator at the opening period, they would have already turned into a pile of powder in Lin Yi's current position. However, Lin Yi was surprised to find that although these terrible five elements killing intent had been hovering around from beginning to end, they did not mean to attack him at all. This feeling was that the surrounding five elements killing intent seemed to be immune to the genuine qi around him and the spirit bird. Such a strange situation, Lin Yi thought about it and understood. It was probably because of the five elements attribute that his genuine qi naturally carried the five elements attribute. Maybe he was mistaken by the five elements killing intent in the five poisoned swamp as the same kind. This was the only possible explanation. After all, the strength difference was more than 1,000 times. If he was not mistaken as the same kind, with the strength of Lin Yi's genuine qi, it was tantamount to a fool's dream to block the attack of these five elements killing intent. As he sank deeper and deeper, Lin Yi clearly felt that the five elements killing intent in all directions was getting heavier and heavier. The quantity was not as heterogeneous as at the beginning, but the strength was not the same as before. Logically speaking, the five elements killing intent should be the same as genuine qi, invisible and formless. However, the five elements murderous qi in front of him had already become a tangible existence. Each of them was like a rapidly swimming five-colored flood dragon. Half of them were illusory while the other half were real. The terrifying pressure that they emitted was even more terrifying than the pressure that he had experienced in the spiritual beast convention. R1152. Chapter 45-42. What is this? Is this the murderous aura of the five elements or some kind of spirit beast? This time, even Lin Yi was somewhat stunned. From the secular world to the heaven stage island, he believed that he had seen a lot of things, but he never knew that a kind of natural existence similar to the spiritual chi of heaven and earth could be so similar to a spiritual creature. Legend has it that when any kind of natural force is strong to a certain extent, it can give birth to a spiritual nature, and then become a unique life form. Therefore, it is not wrong to say that they are spirit beasts, but they are only like spirit beasts. They have not been able to transform into real spirit beasts. The ghostly thing explained in a deliberately calm tone, but at the same time, there was also an inexplicable feeling of shock. Although he was the former Azure Dragon Elder of the Spirit Beast clan, it was his first time entering the Five Poisons Swamp, especially in such a deep place. Naturally, it was also his first time seeing such a powerful murderous aura of the five elements. Too amazing. Lin Yi couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He hadn't felt anything before, but now that he had seen it. No. Wrong? After seeing these flood dragon-like murderous auras of the five elements, he suddenly felt that this was not a place that could be casually entered, including human cultivators and spirit beasts, no matter how strong they were. The power of any one of the five elements' murderous auras here was at least comparable to that of a spirit beast guard, or even stronger. Even a heaven-defying existence might be able to withstand one or two of these murderous auras, but what about hundreds or thousands of them? There were more than tens of thousands of the five elements' murderous auras here. How could he resist them? The reason that Lin Yi could not be attacked here was purely because of his unique five elements attribute, which deceived these flood dragons formed from the five elements' murderous auras, causing them to mistakenly think that he was one of their kind, so that he could barely escape the calamity. But looking at the whole world, how many people were born with the five elements attribute? Other than Lin Yi himself, there wouldn't be a second person like him. Boy, you don't need to be too shocked. With your growth speed, I believe that you will reach their level in a few years. No, it should be said that you can reach their level with just a single wisp of your true chi. 5 elements and 7 attributes. With your aptitude, you are destined to have a bright future. There was a hint of excitement in the ghostly thing's voice. As the former Azure Dragon, there was basically nothing in this world that could make him lose his composure. However, Lin Yi's talent was truly unprecedented, especially his astonishing performance of getting stronger and stronger against strong opponents. Even the ghostly thing could not help but be dumbfounded and overwhelmed with emotions when he thought about it. In time, he had no doubt that Lin Yi would grow to an unprecedented level. He could summon clouds with a flip of his hand, and rain with a flip of his hand. At that time, nothing would be able to stop him. The king of spiritual beasts had always been an unsurpassable pinnacle in the ghostly creature's mind. However, after spending so much time with Lin Yi, this notion had quietly collapsed. With Lin Yi's heaven-defying talent and luck, the ghostly creature believed that one day, he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the invincible king of spiritual beasts, or even surpass it. What? Any wisp of true chi can reach their level? Lin Yi did not think as much as the ghostly creature, but when he heard this, he was completely shocked. Just thinking about it made his blood boil to the point that he could not control himself. They are the 5 elements killing aura, and yours is the 5 elements true chi. In essence, they are actually the same. As long as you are strong enough, nothing is impossible. The ghostly creature paused for a moment, then immediately smiled and said, "Of course, the current you is still too weak. All your true chi combined is not even comparable to a strand of their hair. Don't think too much about it." Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at the half-real and half-illusory flood dragons, and could not help but curse in his heart. Did these things have hair? He did not know how long it had been. He only knew that as he continued to sink, Lin Yi suddenly felt that his surroundings were empty. This feeling did not feel like he was falling through the swamp at all. Instead, it felt like he was falling from the sky, and the speed of his descent suddenly increased by a large margin. Then, with a muffled bang, his feet actually landed on solid ground. Fortunately, Lin Yi had been using true chi to cover himself and the spirit bird. Otherwise, he would have been caught off guard and would have been injured. Fortunately, it seems that the ancient records about the 5 Poisons Swamp are true. Boy, you can withdraw your true chi now. The ghostly creature said. That's it? Lin Yi could not help but feel a little surprised. At the same time, he raised his head and looked around. This was an extremely empty underground space, and about 100 feet above his head, there was a mottled, colorful scene. In addition to the swamp mud everywhere, he could clearly see the solid 5 elements murderous aura constantly hovering above. However, what made Lin Yi feel strange was that whether it was the swamp mud or the murderous aura of the 5 elements, they seemed to be blocked by an invisible layer of cover. This scene made Lin Yi unconsciously think of the large aquariums in the secular world, and it was quite unreal and dreamy. It's fine. According to the ancient records I read before, this should be the source space of the 5 poisoned swamp. Not only is it absolutely safe, but there are also unexpected benefits. As the ghostly creature explained, it tried to use its divine sense to scan the surroundings. Unexpected benefits? Lin Yi was slightly stunned when he heard this. Without waiting for the ghostly creature to give him a hint, he immediately reacted. The density of the spiritual qi in this place was simply unprecedented. In fact, as early as the last time he passed through the 5 poisoned swamp, Lin Yi already knew that the spiritual qi in this place was dense, but he did not pay much attention to it at that time. After all, the spiritual qi he saw at that time was only much denser than other places on the Heaven Stage Island. Compared to the space in the Jade Pendant that Lin Yi had always relied on, it was still a lot worse. But this time was different. The density of the spiritual qi in the space below was more than 100 times denser than above. Lin Yi even found that the spiritual qi here could actually cover his space in the Jade Pendant. It was incredible that there was such a unique treasure land in the world. If he had not experienced it himself, Lin Yi would not even dare to believe that there was such a space under the dangerous and ferocious 5 poison swamp, a holy land that all cultivators and spirit beasts dreamed of. This was the first time the spirit bird had felt such dense spiritual qi, and it immediately cried out in excitement. It happily flew around Lin Yi and began to play, without the slightest trace of its previous exhaustion. Seeing this, Lin Yi wanted to stop it. Although this place was mystical, it was still an unknown place. Who knew what strange things might be entrenched here? After all, there was a flood dragon formed from the killing intent of the 5 elements above his head. According to the ghostly creature, this was the source space of the 5 poison swamp, so there might be some terrifying existence guarding it. Chapter 45-46, Unexpected Benefits. Chapter 45-43. The more blessed a place was, the more dangerous it was. This was an unchanging truth. It was just like searching for treasures in primitive places. Once he relaxed, he would inevitably pay a heavy price. Lin Yi always remembered this law of survival. It was never a bad thing to be careful. The spirit bird's frolicking might attract something it couldn't resist, so it was better to let it be a little more patient. It's okay, let it play by itself. As long as it doesn't fly far, there shouldn't be a problem. I've used my divine sense to scan the surrounding 100 miles and didn't find any signs of living beings. The ghost thing interrupted. For spirit birds, frolicking is cultivation. This is a rare opportunity for it. Oh, okay then. Lin Yi nodded. Since the ghost thing said so, there shouldn't be a problem. He continued to look around and asked, Senior, how big is it down here? Why does it feel like it's much bigger than the 5 poison swamp above? Since the 5 element killing aura was all colorful, it was a natural light source. Although it wasn't as bright as the ground, the visibility wasn't bad. With Lin Yi's eyesight, it wasn't hindered at all. But with one look, it was endless, and he couldn't see the end of it. It should be, but I'm not too sure about the specific situation. The ancient books only said that there was such a source space, but it didn't say the specific situation. The ghost thing wasn't sure about this, but one thing was for sure. At the very least, its divine sense was far from reaching the end. Compared to the 5 poison swamp above, it was obviously many times bigger. Oh, speaking of which, did you specifically go to ancient books and documents? Is it related to this 5-poison swamp? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. The ghost thing had never been here before. Its understanding of the 5-poison swamp obviously came from ancient books. Under normal circumstances, it wasn't strange to occasionally glance at it in ancient books. But with such a detailed understanding, it must have specially looked it up. Yes. I've spent several years investigating this 5-poison swamp, and I've read through all kinds of ancient books and documents. Although I can't directly enter like you, I'm afraid that no one in the world can compare to me in terms of understanding this 5-poison swamp. The ghostly thing said confidently and firmly. Why is that? Could it be that Senior is like the other spirit beasts and wants to take this 5-poison swamp for yourself? Lin Yi joked with a smile. That's not the case. Other than a freak with unique talents like you, no other spirit beasts or human cultivators can withstand the 5 elements' murderous aura. It's the same for me. Actually, it's because of a rumor. The ghostly thing kept him guessing. What rumor? Lin Yi's interest was piqued. Rumor has it that a flood dragon appears in the 5-poison swamp, and it has been seen by other spirit beasts on more than one occasion, the ghostly thing said in a faint voice. Flood dragon? Upon hearing this, Lin Yi was startled and subconsciously raised his head to look at the murderous aura of the 5 elements swimming back and forth. If he had not felt it up close, anyone would think that these were definitely genuine flood dragons. The flood dragons are under the jurisdiction of my dragon clan. Moreover, if there really is a flood dragon, then it's definitely not weak. When I left Heavenly Stage Island, I actually wanted to train a deputy elder of the dragon clan to help me handle matters here. However, in the end, I didn't find a qualified one, so I had to look for one. However, after spending a few years, I ended up with nothing in the end. The ghostly thing paused for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, Now, it seems that the flood dragons they saw were clearly these materialized murderous auras of the 5 elements. They just happened to swim to the surface of the swamp. That should be the case. Lin Yi nodded. Ever since he entered the 5-poison swamp, he had not seen a single living creature. It could only be said that this was a natural land of death. It would be abnormal if a 5-poison flood dragon suddenly appeared. After a pause, Lin Yi asked hesitantly, Senior, what should I do next? This place was a natural treasure trove. The concentration of spirit chi was even denser than in the space of the jade pendant. Perhaps he would never have the chance to encounter such a place again in his lifetime, so Lin Yi did not plan to go up just like that. Of course, he could not go up now. After all, he couldn't fly like the West Mountain Elder Sect Master, and even if he could enter the 5-poison swamp at the top, it would be difficult for him to overcome the huge resistance of the swamp and swim up. Moreover, he couldn't leave Huang Xiaodao's spiritual bird here. Unless the spirit bird did not move like it did when it came down, Lin Yi could barely use his true qi to protect it. However, if the spirit bird did not move, how could he go up? Once it moved, with Lin Yi's current strength, it was very easy for an accident to happen. If an accident really happened in the process, then he would regret it endlessly. Moreover, if he rashly went up now, there was a chance that the West Mountain Elder would not give up and would be guarding the edge of the 5-poison swamp. If he found out that Lin Yi could enter the 5-poison swamp without dying, then he would definitely not rest until he died. In this lifetime, Lin Yi would not be able to take a step out of the 5-poison swamp. However, if he did not go up, then he could only stay in this strange underground space. It was true that the density of spirit chi was extraordinary, but the problem was that who knew what dangers there were in this place. Although Lin Yi did not believe in the existence of a 5-poison flood dragon, his many years of experience made him understand another principle. The risks were always proportional to the benefits. Was such a unique super treasure trove really so safe and harmless? The possibility of this was even lower than the 5-poison flood dragon. If it was in the past, Lin Yi would definitely try to explore this vast and boundless space below. After all, the opportunity was rare, and there might be unexpected surprises. However, after seeing the West Mountain Elder and the super existences of the Spirit Beast clan, Lin Yi's strong self-confidence had long been shaken. As a master at the peak of the middle stage of the Gold Core realm, Lin Yi was now at least 100 times stronger than when he first came to the Heaven Stage Island. However, he did not feel that he was very strong at all. Under the premise that there were no clues, if he dared to explore with this little strength, then he was really tired of living. The space below was much larger than the 5-poison swamp above. God knew if he could find it after going far, and he did not know if he could go up. Or if he went up, maybe there would be other unexpected situations. This place was full of too many uncertainties. What? Do you want to go around now? The ghostly thing said in a mocking tone. You were able to successfully enter the island in the end because they fought for you. As the former Azure Dragon, the values of this ghostly thing could be said to be very different from those of human cultivators. In particular, he had always scoffed and disdained human relationships. However, this time, the actions of Lin Yi's inheritor's girlfriends had truly moved him for the first time. He had never known that the love between a man and a woman could be so selfless and great. It was truly inconceivable. This kind of thing would never happen with spiritual beasts. Perhaps this was the biggest difference between humans and spiritual beasts. Yeah, I wonder how they are now, the ghostly thing couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, Lin Yi's thoughts were also drawn to the common world. It had been more than a year and a half since he had landed on Heavenly Island. If it was possible, he would fly back to the common world right now. He wanted to see how his girlfriends were doing with his own eyes. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have spent a huge sum of money to get the Central Chamber of Commerce to send a letter at the Zhongdao auction house without hesitation. He didn't know if his letter had reached the common world, and he didn't know if he would receive a reply. Heavenly Island and the common world were two different worlds. There was no way he could get a reply. In the past year and a half, although Lin Yi's strength had increased by at least 100 times, he was still far from achieving his most important goal. He didn't even get to see Zhang Liju, let alone find a way to save his girlfriends. This was a result that made Lin Yi very depressed. However, it wasn't as if there was no progress at all. At least, Lin Yi had established a deep relationship with the two disciples, Kai Zhongyang and Hou Guanqi. This meant that he had opened up a path to meet Zhang Liju in the future. All he needed to do was wait for the right opportunity. Other than that, Lin Yi also received another piece of exciting news. It was the information that the Central Merchant Group revealed. All the signs pointed to the same thing. There was a possibility that there was a two-way path between Heavenly Island and the common world. Those goods were the best proof. These two things were very important to Lin Yi. Zhang Liju meant that he could save people, and a two-way path meant that he could go back to the common world. As long as he was strong enough and had both, then all problems could be solved. Although it wasn't as easy as it sounded, at least Lin Yi wasn't as lost as he was at the beginning. As long as he could find the direction, with his incredible potential, everything would come true one day. Lin Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. The ghost's voice rang in his head, its tone a little complicated. Don't think about useless things like that. There is indeed a two-way path between Heavenly Island and the common world. I can tell you this very clearly, and that Zhang Liju that you're looking for, I actually know him too. What? You know him too, senior? Then why haven't I heard you mention him after so long? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. Looking for Zhang Liju was his most important mission on Heavenly Island. Compared to this, everything else was like floating clouds. It was a pity that miracle Dr. Dan St. Zhang Liju was a legendary figure. Even though he had stayed in Middle Island for so long and had such a close relationship with Kai Zhongyang and the others, he still didn't get the chance to meet him. It could only be said that the time wasn't right yet. Lin Yi didn't expect that the ghost that stayed in his jade space all day and night actually knew Zhang Liju, but after so long, it didn't even mention a word about him. How secretive. Say my ass. The ghostly thing snorted and paused for a long time before explaining in a faint tone, I had a fight with that old bastard, and we've already gotten into a conflict. I can't be bothered to talk about this with you, brat. Chapter 45. Had a fight? What do you mean? Lin Yi's interest was piqued, so this thing had fought with Zhang Liju. One of them was the former Green Dragon Elder, the other was the Saint Dan Doctor. Both of them were top-notch existences in the whole of Sky Division. The battle between the two of them would definitely be exciting, but from the tone of the ghost, it didn't seem to have gotten anything out of Zhang Liju, otherwise, it wouldn't have been so quiet. This wasn't surprising at all. Even if this thing was a top-notch master of the Spirit Beast clan, Zhang Liju was still very famous. Even if Zhang Liju was famous for his elixir refinement and medical skills, he wasn't weak at all. In the entire 5 islands of Sky class, there were only a handful of people who could take him down with ease, perhaps even uncountable. Lin Yi wasn't a gossipy person, but this was related to the battle between the ghost and Zhang Liju, and his curiosity was ignited. It's nothing, we just fought once. The ghost humphed. It didn't want to say much, but seeing how excited Lin Yi was, it finally said, back then, that old bastard Zhang Liju found a way to go to the common world, but he needed the help of all 7 of his wives to open the path. Wait. 7? How could there be 7? Didn't he only have 2 wives? Lin Yi froze. Zhang Liju's 2 wives were Master Shui and Master Ice. This was something everyone knew. Even when he came to Sky Division Island, the locals said the same thing. Why were there so many? Even a disciple like you, who you've never met before, has so many girlfriends. How could that old bastard only have 2? The ghost laughed weirdly and said with envy, to be honest, that old bastard's luck is off the charts. He only had 2 wives before he came to Sky Division Island. In the end, he had all kinds of luck with women and found 5 wives in a row. What was even more amazing was that all 7 of his wives had spiritual roots of the 5 elements and 7 attributes. What kind of luck do you think this is? As a spiritual beast, this ghost wasn't interested in how many wives a human could have, but Zhang Liju's 7 wives were all of the 5 elements and 7 elements. This was something to be envious of. After all, this was something that could be put to good use. Lin Yi couldn't help but be speechless as he listened to the ghostly thing's strange laughter. These 7 wives of Zhang Liju's really made one speechless. This cheap shifu that he'd never met before couldn't have found them based on the 5 elements and 7 elements, right? Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? But when he thought about himself, forget it, it was better not to talk about others behind their backs. Could it be that he is also a 5 elements cultivator? Otherwise, even if his 7 wives gathered the 5 elements and 7 attributes, without a medium, they wouldn't be able to open the formation channel, right? Lin Yi asked. No, he isn't a 5-element cultivator. Didn't I tell you? You're the only freak that has gathered all 7 elements and 7 attributes. The ghostly thing curled its lips. Then how did he? Lin Yi couldn't help but wonder. Unless this cheap shifu of his had really created a revolutionary formation channel, otherwise, no matter what he did, he couldn't do without the 5 elements as a medium. It's simple. That old bastard isn't a 5-element cultivator himself. But he has a 5 elements divine stone. The ghostly thing explained. 5 elements divine stone? What's that? Lin Yi raised an eyebrow. It's a rare treasure that can be used as a medium to replace the 5 elements. Other than the one in the old bastard's hand, I'm afraid there's no second one in the world. The ghostly thing's tone was a little bitter. If he had a 5 elements divine stone, perhaps he wouldn't have had to beg that old bastard back then, and so many things wouldn't have happened. Oh. I see. Lin Yi nodded. He didn't show much interest in the 5 elements divine stone. After all, he could be the medium himself. He didn't need the 5 elements divine stone. And then, why did you guys start fighting? I spent a great deal of effort to finally find this old bastard, and I humbly asked him to help me open the formation passageway so that I could make a trip to the mortal world. In the end, this old bastard actually didn't agree. Even today, the ghostly thing was still angry when he talked about it. As for why he wanted to go to the common world, it didn't need to be said that it was to find the bloodline of the spirit beast king. Why? Did you guys have a conflict before? Lin Yi found it strange. Miracle Dr. Dan Zhongliju was so famous, how could he be a petty person? Even if he wasn't selfless enough to help others, this ghostly thing was still the green dragon elder of the spirit beasts. He shouldn't have no value at all, right? Conflict my ass, this old bastard isn't like the other human practitioners who kill spirit beasts. All he does is concoct pills and save people. What conflict could there be between us? The ghostly thing paused and sighed. The reason why he didn't agree was because he wanted to protect his people. He said that every time the channel was opened, his 7 wives would have to pass out. Even he couldn't guarantee that he could wake them up every time. The risk was huge. Couldn't guarantee? Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. Didn't that mean that even if he got Zhongliju's help, his wives might not be able to wake up? You don't have to be so nervous. It's just an excuse from the old bastard. The miracle Dr. Dan Zhongliju is not someone who doesn't deserve his reputation. Although he said he wasn't confident, when have you ever seen him fail? Not even once. That's not confidence, my ass. The ghostly thing consoled and said angrily. Chapter 45-46. What the hell, why am I involved in this all of a sudden? Lin Yi was speechless as he smiled bitterly. Did he help you after that? I think so, or else how did you get to the common world? The ghost went silent for a while and said faintly, I guess he helped me half. At half? What's that supposed to mean? Lin Yi paused. Nothing much, I just kept bugging him, and that old thing got annoyed by my nagging, so he agreed to fight with me. If I won, he'd help me, but if I lost, then there's nothing left to talk about, and I'd never bother him again, the ghost explained. And then? What happened? Lin Yi asked impatiently. He really wanted to know who was stronger between the ghost and Zhongliju, these two peak existences. We fought for 3 days and nights, from the sky to the ground to the sea, and in the process, we even destroyed 5 small islands, and neither of us won. It was a draw. The ghost's tone was a little excited as it talked about this. After all, an opponent like Zhongliju, who was almost undefeatable, was hard to find in this world. Ugh, that was really intense. Lin Yi couldn't help but be speechless. From what he knew, the stronger the practitioner, the more they would focus on killing in one hit, especially at the level of this ghost and Zhongliju. Normally, they would be able to decide who was stronger in one move, but the two fought for 3 days and 3 nights without a clear winner. It was obvious that they were on par with each other. It was indeed intense. Other than Zhongliju, I've never met an opponent like this before. Even Vermilion Bird wasn't this difficult to deal with, and it was a piece of cake. I have to say, that old thing is really something. The ghost nodded and sighed. As the previous green dragon, he had always been proud and arrogant, and other than the spirit beast king, he rarely respected anyone like this. Zhongliju was a rare exception. What happened after that? Lin Yi continued. After that? No one lost, and no one won. The previous bet can't be counted. Since we fought to a draw, I can only help half of it. That old thing didn't help me open the formation passage, but he lent me the 5 elements divine stone, so I can go to the secular world. However, the price I have to pay is that I've been tortured by that huge pressure. I've ended up like this. The ghostly thing said in a self-deprecating manner. I see. Lin Yi nodded. He already knew what happened next, so there was no need to continue asking. But after some thought, he asked, wait, if Zhongliju didn't open the portal because he didn't want his 7 wives to get hurt, then why did he go to the common world? The reason why he asked this was because Lin Yi suddenly remembered that the cauldron in the tomb had disappeared for some reason. If he was right, it should be Zhongliju's doing. This meant that he had been to the common world at least once. Could it be that he ran into some emergency that he couldn't even care about his 7 wives? With the protective nature that the ghost described, that didn't seem possible, right? He did tell me. Since it was a tie, he could help me open the formation channel after a while. However, the prerequisite was that he had to wait until his wives' strength had increased to the same realm. Only then would he be able to open the formation channel. At most, they'll just use up some pure chi, and they won't all get hurt or fall unconscious. They'll recover after a few years of rest, so there's no need to take any risks. The ghost said. So that's what you mean. His wives have all fulfilled the requirements, and that's why he can go back and forth between the common world and Sky-class island. Lin Yi nodded. Isn't that a good suggestion? We just need to wait for a few years, and we won't have to take any risks. Senior, could it be that you can't even wait for a few years? Although the lifespan of a high-level cultivator, especially a top-notch spiritual beast like the ghost, was not endless, it was still extremely long. A few years was just a blink of an eye, and it could be gone by casually in closed-door cultivation. Why would it take such a huge risk to fight for a few years and end up like this? No matter how one looked at it, it was not worth it. Of course not. The ghostly being's voice was scorching, then it smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for the fact that the Spirit Beast clan situation was already in dire straits, based on my personality, why would I lower my pride and ask a human for help? Even when I was facing the Spirit Beast King, I've never been so submissive. If I had waited a few more years, I wouldn't have had any problems, but the Spirit Beast clan has already fallen apart. You've seen how ambitious the Vermilion Bird is, so how could I possibly wait? That's true, but haste makes waste. From what I see, if you hadn't been so impulsive back then and listened to Zhang Liju and waited a few more years, things wouldn't have gotten out of hand like this. At least, with you and the Spirit Beast clan, even if Vermilion Bird got a puppet to become the new Spirit Beast King, it wouldn't be able to do whatever it wants like this. Lin Yi analyzed. Before the situation was clear, it was better to stay put than to take action. This was his experience over the years. However, everyone had a different personality, so naturally, their style of doing things was also different. If the ghost did as he said, then it wouldn't be a ghost. That's true. It's too bad that I didn't meet you back then, kid, or I wouldn't be where I am today. To be honest, you may not be strong, but there are many things that I can learn from you. The ghost sighed. This wasn't just being courteous, it was the truth. Lin Yi was able to grow at such a shocking speed in just a few years, and it wasn't just because of his talent and luck, but also because of his style of doing things. If it were anyone else, even if they had the same talent and luck, they would have been killed a long time ago. Chapter 45-47. The ghost was actually a little embarrassed, and after a long pause, he said weakly, "It's just that this experience is a little embarrassing, what's there to announce? Besides, we weren't that close back then, I didn't have the nerve to tell you about this. My God, if you had told me about this earlier, I wouldn't have had to live in fear for so long." Lin Yi held his forehead, speechless. He had been living in fear for the past 1.5 years, not because of the pressure from his enemies, but because he had been worrying about Zhang Liju. What if Zhang Liju didn't have the confidence to save his women? Or, what if Zhang Liju had the confidence to save them, but couldn't go back to the common world? With Lin Yi's personality, he wouldn't get angry no matter how strong the enemy was, just like how he was facing Shishan Elder right now. At most, he would find a place to hide, and when he was strong enough, he would come back to settle the score. It wasn't a big deal. But the two things he was worried about couldn't be solved with just hard work and practice. Whether or not he could succeed depended on Zhang Liju, and Lin Yi himself couldn't help at all. This feeling of helplessness was the most torturous thing. For the past 1.5 years, Lin Yi couldn't help but worry whenever he closed his eyes, afraid that he would get a negative answer. If it weren't for his strong mental fortitude, any other person would have been tortured to the point of having a nervous breakdown. But at the very least, these two questions were answered by this damn thing, and they were both positive answers as well. It was a cause for celebration, and Lin Yi's heart could finally be at ease. Although Zhang Liju said that he didn't have the confidence to save the inheritor, as the ghost said, he had never failed before, so one could see that he was very confident. As long as there were no accidents, it shouldn't be a problem for him to save the inheritor. Other than that, Lin Yi didn't have to worry about not being able to go back to the common world. Even if he couldn't get a conclusion from the Central Chamber of Commerce in the future, as long as he could find Zhang Liju, there would definitely be a way to open the portal to the common world. This news was like a reassuring pill for Lin Yi. However, after knowing these two pieces of news, Lin Yi wasn't in a rush anymore. Zhang Liju had opened it once 2 years ago, and according to the ghost, his 7 wives needed to rest for a few years before they could recover. He wouldn't be able to open it again in the near future, so there was no point for Lin Yi to worry now. He might as well focus on accumulating his strength. Of course, if there was a chance in the future to explore the secret passageway of the Central Chamber of Commerce, that would be a pleasant surprise as well. However, with Zhang Liju as a reliable option, Lin Yi didn't have to be too insistent on it. He didn't have to worry about it. After all, the Central Chamber of Commerce was full of masters, and it wasn't a place to be messed with. Now that both of his worries had been resolved, Lin Yi's spirit was lifted. There was an obvious change in his spirit compared to before, and although he was still as calm and reserved as before, there was now a sunny aura around him that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. You can't blame me for this. I'm not a gossiper. Why would I keep this kind of embarrassing thing on my lips all day long? You're lucky that you're able to hear it now. I was planning to keep this to myself and never tell anyone else. Now that I've made an exception for you, what's there to be dissatisfied about? The ghost laughed coldly. At the same time, the ghost couldn't help but feel a little emotional. When he was in the common world, he didn't have much interaction with Lin Yi, let alone a close relationship. So when they first came to Sky Class Island, the only thing he did to protect Lin Yi was to keep him alive. Other than that, he didn't care about anything else. But in the past year or so, the two of them had been through thick and thin together, and Lin Yi's temperament was to his liking. Their relationship was completely different from before, and the things he wouldn't say or do in the past weren't strange at all. In fact, he felt that it was only natural for him to do so now. All right, then I'm really flattered. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and nod. No matter what, the stone in his heart had been lifted, and the next step was clear. He had to increase his strength as much as he could and find Zhang Liju. Other than that, everything else was secondary. Of course. The ghostly thing snickered and returned to the topic at hand. All right, I've said all that needs to be said. Hurry up and start cultivating. Don't waste this great opportunity. All right, do you want to scout the surroundings first? Lin Yi didn't plan on exploring this place alone, but at the very least, he needed to know the surroundings like the back of his hand. Otherwise, he might be targeted by some scary being in the middle of his practice. That's not necessary. I'll use my divine sense to keep an eye on the surroundings, and I'll let you know if anything strange happens. The ghost said. In his current state, he didn't dare say anything else, but at least he had absolute confidence in his divine sense. Not only did it not deteriorate, but it had also improved quite a bit compared to when he was at his peak. After all, this was the only thing he could rely on. All right, I'll leave it to you then, Senior. Lin Yi nodded. In fact, even if the ghost didn't keep watch for him, he still had the jade space to warn him. No matter what happened, he would be able to react in time. There was nothing to worry about. After that, Lin Yi turned around and told the spirit bird not to go too far away. Then, he leaped onto a high platform next to him. Not only was this underground space empty, but the terrain was also quite strange. Every 100 or so feet, there was a tall narrow platform. Some of them were directly connected to the top of the swamp, while others were a bit off. The platform that Lin Yi chose just happened to be able to reach the swamp. Standing on the high platform, Lin Yi's body was only a foot away from the swamp. Although he didn't sink into it, the murderous aura of the 5 elements would emerge from time to time. Sometimes, it would affect Lin Yi's body. Lin Yi didn't wrap his body with qi like he did when he first came down. After all, the murderous aura of the 5 elements would ignore him and he wouldn't be able to practice. However, he didn't dare to touch the murderous aura of the 5 elements too rashly, so he didn't go deep into the swamp. Instead, he chose this high platform that was just a little bit above ground. Chapter 45-48. The murderous aura of the 5 elements did not completely come out, but only a small part of it came out from the mud like a dragon swinging its tail. At the same time, it did not directly touch Lin Yi. Lin Yi was just touched by the edge of it. However, it was just a little bit, but it was enough to make Lin Yi feel that he could not bear it. Don't look at the insignificant aftermath at the edge, even invisible to the naked eye, but Lin Yi could still clearly feel the terrible power of the murderous aura of the 5 elements. At this moment, there was only one emotion in his heart. No wonder the murderous aura of the 5 elements could kill everything. Even the existence of the ghost did not dare to go deep into it. No wonder the ghost just asked him to use genuine qi to protect his body, otherwise, he would have been killed. The murderous aura of the 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. The 5 basic attributes of the murderous aura were integrated into one. This was not as simple as 1 + 1. Just take the aftermath of the impact on Lin Yi's body. If each attribute of the murderous aura was taken out separately, even if Lin Yi did not use any protection, with his current physical strength, these attributes of the murderous aura could not hurt a hair on his body at all. It could be said that it was insignificant. But now, after these 5 attributes of the murderous aura were all integrated into the 5 elements of the 5 elements, the power increased more than thousands of times. Even if Lin Yi was very careful, he still almost could not bear it. He was about to fall from the high platform on the spot. Fortunately, he held it with his hands in time and gritted his teeth to bear it. What did it feel like to be sliced into 1,000 pieces? Lin Yi had only talked about it casually before, but this time, he was experiencing it for real. Even if his body was strong and his heart strong, he wouldn't be able to endure it if he didn't have the resolve to do so. Without this resolve, it didn't matter how strong he was. The time when the murderous aura of the 5 elements touched him was actually only a short moment, not even a blink of an eye. But in the eyes of Lin Yi, this moment was extremely long, and other people felt that a day was like a year. However, for Lin Yi, whose body felt like it was being sliced by knives, every second felt like a year. In just a short moment, Lin Yi felt as if he had just taken a shower. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat from head to toe. Phew. Finally successfully withstanding the first close contact with the murderous aura of the 5 elements, Lin Yi let out a long breath of turbid air as if he had survived a disaster. Even the pressure that the West Mountain Elder gave him was nothing more than this. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. This murderous aura of the 5 elements is really terrifying. There is actually such a terrifying thing in the world. This time, I have learned something new. You brat, just be content. The power of the 5 elements' murderous qi is not something that any human or spirit beast can resist. If it was another expert, let alone a mere gold core stage, even if it was a nascent soul stage cultivator, you would have died without a doubt. Only a freak like you with the 5 elements spiritual root can withstand it without missing an arm or a leg. There was a hint of envy in the ghostly thing's tone. Even in his previous heyday, he would never dare to use the murderous aura of the 5 elements to temper his body like Lin Yi. This was something that he didn't even dare to think about. Only a freak like Lin Yi could have such an opportunity and luck. It must be known that the stronger the tempering, the faster the improvement. This was an unchanging truth since ancient times. Of course, the premise was that he could survive. Otherwise, it would be purely courting death. The murderous aura of the 5 elements is so terrifying. Senior, you should have said it earlier. Fortunately, I was careful enough and didn't jump in directly. I only suffered a little bit of aftermath. Otherwise, if I was directly hit by the murderous aura of the 5 elements, then I would be dead. Lin Yi spat out his tongue in fear. This was the truth. The experience just now had already made him understand that although his unique physique of the 5 elements spiritual root could use the murderous aura of the 5 elements to cultivate, it was simply a fool's dream to completely withstand it. At most, his endurance was much stronger than other cultivators. Hey, I don't have the attribute of the 5 elements, and I have never really touched the murderous aura of the 5 elements. How would I know that this thing is so powerful? The ghost thing curled its lips disapprovingly. Of course, it was also familiar with Lin Yi's temperament. It knew that Lin Yi would not rashly advance. Otherwise, it would not be so irresponsible. At least, it would remind him. Lin Yi was suddenly speechless. He looked up at the top of his head with lingering fear. With a little carelessness, the murderous aura of the 5 elements that would emerge from time to time could become the king of hell. This was not a joke. Don't be silly. Tell me, how is the effect? The ghost thing asked with interest. In such a short moment, what effect can it have? Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh when he heard the words. However, in the middle of the words, his whole body suddenly seemed to be struck by lightning, and he was suddenly stunned. It was reasonable to say that any kind of cultivation method was painstaking. It must be persisted for a long time to see obvious effects. There was no cultivation method in the world that could immediately see the effect. Even the evil cultivation method could not be so fast, unless one took medicine, and it must be the best medicine to see the effect immediately. However, Lin Yi's deep-rooted understanding was shattered at this moment. He would have scoffed at this inconceivable thing if he'd heard it from someone else, but now that it was happening to him, he had no choice but to believe it. Although it was only a short moment, not even a blink of an eye, but Lin Yi felt the real effect. He dared not say much, at least the strength of the genuine qi in his body had obviously changed compared to just now, and the change was not just a little bit. This was simply impossible in the past. Even when he was cultivating in the space of the jade pendant, Lin Yi had never experienced such an exaggerated and amazing effect. He was now completely dumbfounded. Even if he took medicine, it would take a while for the medicine to take effect, right? How could there be such an immediate effect? Even a calm kid like you is shocked. It seems that the effect is just as I expected. It is indeed very exaggerated. The ghostly thing cackled when it saw Yi Xuan's reaction. How could this be? This is too fucking exaggerated, isn't it? Apart from the shock, Lin Yi was not happy, but worried. The effect came too fast and too sudden, and he was a little worried about whether he would be possessed. After all, in the understanding of ordinary people, more haste, less speed, and it was easy to have big problems if the cultivation progress was too fast. It's okay. This is within my expectations, it's quite normal. The ghost thing comforted with a smile. Chapter 45-49. Of course it's normal. You have the 5 elements spiritual root, so your compatibility with the 5 elements murderous aura can be said to be perfect. The 5 elements murderous aura is a natural tonic for you. If you cultivate in the 5 elements murderous aura, in the words of us spirit beasts, it's called natal cultivation. It's very normal for you to improve by leaps and bounds every day. There's nothing to be surprised about. The ghost thing was not worried at all. Natal cultivation? What does that mean? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. This was the first time he had heard of this term. As the name suggests, it's a cultivation method that God has given you. Any other cultivation method is going astray. Either your progress is too slow, or you'll be possessed by the devil. Natal cultivation is the good fortune that all spirit beasts dream of. Not even 1 in 10 million spirit beasts can truly realize it. It's something that can't be obtained even if you beg for it. The ghost thing sighed with emotion. Why? According to what you said, natal cultivation should be the most suitable cultivation method for you. As long as a spirit beast has a little bit of comprehension, it shouldn't be that difficult to find the most suitable cultivation method for you, right? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. That's right, but we spirit beasts are different from you human cultivators. Even if you human cultivators have different physiques and talents, you're all of the same clan after all. You can learn from each other. However, there are more than 10 million spirit beasts, especially many high-level spirit beasts that are inherited from the same bloodline. How can there be so many templates for us to learn from? The ghost thing paused for a moment and continued, moreover, as long as it's a high-level spirit beast, its racial talents are often very unique. Even if it finds the natal cultivation method, it must have a corresponding unique cultivation environment. Unless it's extremely lucky, it's easier said than done to find such a perfect cultivation place. That's true. Lin Yi nodded in realization. If he was a spirit beast, if he hadn't been forced to escape into the 5-poison swamp, even if he knew that he had the 5-element spiritual root, he would never have thought that there was such a different world under the swamp. Natal cultivation was even more impossible to talk about. Originally, the sudden appearance of the West Mountain Elder was a calamity for Lin Yi. For Lin Yi, it was a calamity, but now it seemed like it was a blessing instead of a curse. In fact, recently, Lin Yi had a feeling that the rich vital energy in his jade pendant space seemed to be faintly decreasing. He didn't know why. Maybe it was Lin Yi's own illusion, or maybe it was because after his strength continued to increase, the supply of genuine qi in the space of the jade pendant was not enough for Lin Yi. Anyway, one thing was very clear, and that was the effect of the space of the jade pendant on his cultivation was not as obvious as before. At the very least, his cultivation speed had unknowingly dropped by a large margin. However, even if Lin Yi was aware of this, it was useless. The effect of the space of the jade pendant becoming weaker was only relative to the past. If compared to the outside world, it was still incomparable. Therefore, Lin Yi could only continue to rely on the spiritual qi in the space of the jade pendant to practice as usual. But now, by chance, he suddenly found a place with a higher concentration of spiritual qi than the space of the jade pendant. Moreover, he could use the murderous aura of the 5 elements to carry out natal cultivation at any time. For Lin Yi, this was simply a unique treasure land. In the future, when he went out, he really had to thank the West Mountain Elder sect. While the two were talking, the warning sound of the jade pendant sounded again. Not far from the side, another murderous aura of the 5 elements surged out. Just like before, Lin Yi was still hit by it. His body still felt like it was being twisted by a knife. But even if Lin Yi had just persevered, now that he knew the great benefits, it was even more impossible for him to be discouraged midway. He was being tempered by the aftermath of the murderous aura of the 5 elements. The only thing Lin Yi had to do now was to clench his teeth and persevere. Every time he was tempered by the aftermath, the strength of his body's genuine qi would increase by a level. Even the strength of his physical body would also undergo earth-shaking changes. This kind of arduous tempering was even more effective than those elixirs. After taking elixirs, one's strength would be like a castle in the air. At the very least, one would need a period of time to stabilize one's strength. Otherwise, it would be extremely easy for one's foundation to be unstable, which would lead to the tragic consequences of qi deviation. However, this kind of tempering was different. Every bit of growth was real strength. Not only would one's foundation not weaken because of this, it would only become stronger. Once, twice, thrice, what Lin Yi did next was to keep repeating. Each time was an extremely difficult challenge, but each time he could benefit a lot. Of course, this was directly proportional to the risk. In just an hour, Lin Yi had been coaxed down the pillar of the high platform for a total of 3 times. It was not because his willpower had weakened, but because these 3 times he was too close to the murderous aura of the 5 elements. With his current strength, he could at most bear the aftermath, and it was still far from being tempered by the murderous aura of the 5 elements. Fortunately, Lin Yi had a physique of the 5 elements, and his tolerance to the murderous aura of the 5 elements was much stronger than ordinary people. Otherwise, just these 3 brushes with the murderous aura of the 5 elements would be enough to kill him. 3 days, Lin Yi had been persisting for 3 days. This time was insignificant for any cultivator. It could be said to be a snap of the fingers. However, for Lin Yi, who had been tempered and tortured by the murderous aura of the 5 elements, this might be the longest 3 days he had ever experienced. The test of physical and mental perseverance could be said to have reached the limit. But correspondingly, the benefits that Lin Yi had obtained were also unparalleled. When he came in, he was only at the peak of the middle stage of gold core. However, after these 3 days of baptism and tempering, Lin Yi had impressively touched the barrier of the late stage of gold core. He was only a step away from going further. This result made Lin Yi very happy. There was the covetous Shishan old sect outside. Every bit of strength was a bit more capital to protect his life. Every time he broke through a layer, it might be the distance between life and death. However, although he had successfully touched the barrier of the late stage of gold core, it was still difficult to break through in a short time. After all, Lin Yi had just reached the peak of the middle stage of gold core. Although he was the strongest gold core master who had a perfect breakthrough, it was impossible to break through the threshold of the late stage of gold core like drinking plain water. He still needed a suitable opportunity. This opportunity could be taking the gold core or other special circumstances. As long as the opportunity came, with the strength of Lin Yi, the breakthrough was naturally a matter of course. Chapter 45-50. But good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Lin Yi didn't plan on using the fruit right now. After all, it was a treasure that was hard to find in this world, and he might not be able to find it again in this lifetime. He had to save it for the most crucial moment. Cent-pound at the moment, Lin Yi felt that it was not the most critical time yet. He had a faint hunch that even if he did not use the myriad golden dan fruit, he would have a chance to break through to the late stage of gold core. Because every time he was tempered by the aftermath of the 5 elements' murderous aura, he could clearly feel the throbbing sign that he was about to break through. However, what made Lin Yi feel a little pity was that although the sign was very obvious and strong, he did not really break through after every time he endured the aftermath. It just remained at the level of the sign. It seemed that he could not break through successfully. Lin Yi knew that this state of eagerness to break through would not last long. If he could not break through before it disappeared, he would have to wait for the next sign to appear. Then, he did not know when. Cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. There were many examples of people who could not break through when it was time to break through, and thus fell into a quagmire. Fortune comes from risk. It seems that you have to take a little risk. The ghost suggested. Understood. Lin Yi nodded. Although he had always been cautious, he would never refuse some necessary risks. Just like now, there were only 2 ways for him to take advantage of the situation to break through. The first was to take the golden dan fruit, but he did not have this plan, so he could only use the ready-made 5 elements murderous aura in front of him to force out his greater potential. If it was someone else, they would definitely not dare to do this, but Lin Yi could. Since he could bear the aftermath of the 5 elements murderous aura, he could naturally go further and try to get closer to the 5 elements murderous aura. Of course, the premise was that he had to master this degree, otherwise it would not be called stimulating his potential. It would be courting death. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi moved to a high platform beside him. Originally, when he stood on this platform, he could only reach the 5 poisons swamp above his head. But now, he could directly enter the 5 poisons swamp on this platform. Sure enough, Lin Yi was immediately targeted by a killing intent of the 5 elements. If the 5 poisons swamp was a pond, and the 5 elements of murderous aura were piranhas, then Lin Yi was a living bait. When he was standing on the high platform, Lin Yi was still floating above the water. That was why the piranhas weren't aroused. At most, they were splashed a little. But now, the bait was directly thrown into the pond, and the piranhas immediately revealed their ferocious nature. Perhaps because Lin Yi had the attribute of the 5 elements, to a certain extent, he had the same smell as the 5 elements of murderous aura, so the 5 elements of murderous aura did not gather in the distance. Otherwise, even if Lin Yi had 10,000 lives, he would still die without a burial place. But even so, just the 5 elements of murderous aura beside him was enough to kill him. Previously, when facing the aftermath of the 5 elements of murderous aura, Lin Yi was already suffering. Now, he was directly facing the 5 elements of murderous aura. His whole body was trembling uncontrollably. This was the biological instinct when facing a fatal crisis. Even if Lin Yi wanted to control it, he couldn't, unless he was already a dead man. Be careful. Don't go overboard. At this time, even the ghostly thing was frightened. Although this was his suggestion, even he couldn't stay calm when it really came to this moment. After all, he was on Lin Yi's body. He could feel the horror of the 5 elements of murderous aura. This thing could really kill someone if he was not careful. If Lin Yi died, even he would be unlucky. I know. Lin Yi responded in a deep voice. At the same time, the 5 elements of murderous aura slammed into his body. Lin Yi suddenly clenched his teeth so hard that they bled. All the muscles on his body trembled like a sieve. The tempering of the aftermath before was already like being cut by thousands of knives, but the pain at this moment was more than 100 times. It's coming. Under the extreme pain, the real qi in Lin Yi's body suddenly moved wildly spontaneously forming a confrontation with the 5 elements of murderous aura outside, and it skyrocketed uncontrollably. The opportunity for a breakthrough had come. The thick barrier in front of the late stage of gold core suddenly loosened under the crazy impact of the real qi. The breakthrough was close at hand. Lin Yi didn't dare to neglect it. He quickly lowered his body and withdrew from the 5 poison swamp. Without saying anything, he jumped down from the high platform and sat cross-legged, concentrating on the breakthrough. First, he was directly facing the tempering of the 5 elements of murderous aura. This moment was already the limit that he could endure. Second, the breakthrough process could not be disturbed at all. Otherwise, if it was light, he would be injured. If it was heavy, he would be possessed by the devil. There were many cases where he even died on the spot. The 5 elements of murderous aura could only be used to find the opportunity for a breakthrough. If he wanted to break through while enduring the tempering of the 5 elements of murderous aura, it was simply courting death. Even if he was courting death, he should not seek it in such a way. Everything was ready, and the east wind had arrived. This time, Lin Yi's breakthrough could be said to be a matter of course. In just half an hour, he was reborn without any wind or danger, and his whole temperament was completely new. Although there seemed to be only a thin line between the peak of the middle stage of gold core and the late stage of gold core, the meaning of the two was completely different. Before, he was just a typical gold core expert, but now he had reached a level where he could look forward to a higher realm. After entering the late stage of gold core, most cultivators had already begun to prepare for the next breakthrough to the Yuanying realm. Chu Bubi was an example. Ordinary cultivators were still like this, but Lin Yi, as the strongest gold core cultivator who had a perfect breakthrough, the process from the late stage of gold core to the great perfection of gold core was much faster than ordinary people. Stepping into the late stage of gold core meant that he was not far from the Yuanying realm. After carefully feeling the new power in his body, Lin Yi took a deep breath. From the peak of the middle stage of gold core to the late stage of gold core, he could clearly feel that the improvement in strength was not a little bit, it was simply a skyrocketing increase. Of course, Lin Yi did not show too much joy. Not being surprised by favors or disgraces, this had always been Lin Yi's style. Moreover, after seeing the West Mountain Old Master, who was an evil cultivator, and the even more terrifying Spirit Beast guards of the Spirit Beast clan, this little improvement in strength was not worth mentioning for those high and mighty super existences. Naturally, Lin Yi would not be ecstatic for this little breakthrough. Chapter 45-51. Of course, Lin Yi was not a person who was too ambitious. Advancing to the late Jidun stage was still a gratifying progress. According to his previous experience, his current strength was enough to fight with a master of the late Yuanying stage, and he had the confidence to win. However, if it was a master of the Great Yuanying stage, or a master of the higher Xianying stage, it was estimated that there was not much he could do. He could only rely on the super bomb as a trump card to survive. Yennefer Lin Yi shook his head slightly. This result would have made others ecstatic, but he couldn't help but be a little disappointed. After all, the opponent he was going to face was not a master of the late Yuanying stage, but a giant evil cultivator. With his current strength, facing the West Mountain Old Master, the result was difficult to be different from before. But fortunately, he didn't need to face the old monster of the West Mountain Old Master now. After all, the other party saw him rush into the 5 poisonous swamp with his own eyes. He should think that he had already died. This threat was temporarily ignored, but Lin Yi didn't intend to go out like this. Now only 3 days had passed. God knew if the West Mountain Old Master had already left. With the old monster's hysterical state before, even if he saw Lin Yi die in the 5 poisonous swamp with his own eyes, maybe he would stay and watch for a while. If Lin Yi went out now, there was still the risk of being caught by the other party. What's more, this treasure land was so rare, and the excellent effect of cultivation could be said to be rare in the world. Even the space of Lin Yi's own jade pendant was far from this. How could Lin Yi easily miss this kind of opportunity? Of course, he had to stay here to cultivate for a while. Anyway, there were still 5 months before the deadline of the task of the 3 pavilions in the North Island. Lin Yi didn't need to go back so hurriedly. No matter what he did, only strength was the foundation of survival. And if he stayed here for a few more months, the West Mountain Old Master outside, even if he was cunning, must have thought that he had died long ago. Waiting for 10 days to half a month was the limit. It was impossible to stay here for a few months. If he was not mistaken, he should have long since forgotten about the fact that he had died without a corpse. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. After making up his mind, Lin Yi immediately struck while the iron was hot and continued to cultivate. Just like before, he stood on the high platform near the 5 poison swamp to accept the tempering of the aftermath of the 5 elements' murderous aura. Now that his strength had improved, Lin Yi's tolerance for the 5 elements' murderous aura was obviously much stronger. Now, facing the aftermath was not as painful and torturous as it was at the beginning. Instead, it became somewhat easy. However, when Lin Yi was gradually able to fully withstand the aftermath of the 5 elements' murderous qi, he found that the improvement effect was not as exaggerated as at the beginning, although it was still much better than the jade pendant space. But compared to before, it was clearly several times worse. This was a matter of course. After gradually adapting to the aftermath of the murderous aura of the 5 elements, the effect of the tempering would gradually weaken. When Lin Yi could completely adapt to it, it would be like eating and drinking normally. There would be no effect at all. Therefore, if Lin Yi wanted to go further, the only way was to increase the intensity. A little closer to the 5 elements' murderous qi. Little by little, the distance between himself and the 5 elements' murderous qi was what Lin Yi had been doing. Every time he got closer, it meant that his strength was stronger. If one day he could calmly face the 5 elements' murderous qi, and even casually wave a genuine qi that could be comparable to the 5 elements' murderous qi, then he must have stood at the peak of the entire Heaven Stage Island. Of course, this day was still far away. Cultivation knew no time. Day after day, Lin Yi used the 5 elements' murderous qi to temper his body. After he gradually adapted to this crazy closed-door cultivation rhythm, 3 months almost passed in the blink of an eye. Fleeting. Usually, Lin Yi would cultivate on the high platform close to the 5 elements' murderous qi. Every few days, when his strength increased, he would change to a high platform that was closer to the 5 elements' murderous qi. If he was close to breaking through, then he would take the risk to go deep into the 5 poison swamp and directly face the 5 elements' murderous qi to stimulate his own limit. Accompanied by a clear cry, a nimble shadow flew from afar and circled back and forth around Lin Yi's position. It was the spirit bird that Huang Xiaotao had left for him. Perhaps it was because the spirit qi here was very rich, but in the past 3 months, although Lin Yi had never seen the spirit bird actively cultivate and only cared about playing, if compared to 3 months ago, he would find that this guy had been reborn. Whether it was the momentum or the speed, they were a lot better than before. Even the originally docile and harmless eyes faintly had a few points of sharpness unique to high-level flying spirit beasts. This was an unexpected surprise. Phew. Lin Yi let out a long breath, stood up and stretched his body, a smile on his face as he jumped onto the spirit bird's back. There's 2 months left until the mission deadline, it's time to go back, he muttered to himself. At this moment, after experiencing a full 3 months of hard cultivation, Lin Yi didn't seem to be much different from before at first glance. If there was a difference from when he had just broken through to the late stage of gold core, it was that the aura around him was more profound and restrained. That was all. However, this was just the appearance. For the results of these 3 months of hard cultivation, even a freak like Lin Yi, who had long been used to jumping levels like a rocket, couldn't help but feel excited at the moment when he thought about it. There was no other reason. He was now a real master of the peak of Gold Core realm. From escaping into the 5 Poisons swamp until now, only 3 months had passed. However, Lin Yi's strength had broken through from the initial peak of the middle stage of Gold Core realm all the way to the current peak of Gold Core realm, which represented the limit of the Gold Core realm. If this matter was spread out, it would definitely subvert everyone's outlook on life. From the peak of the middle stage of Gold Core realm to the peak of Gold Core realm, let alone 3 months, even if it was 30 years, it would be a fool's dream. There were many people who were stuck for 300 years without any progress in the end. If they knew that this miracle happened to Lin Yi, their eyes would definitely bleed from jealousy. It had to be said that the mysterious and vast underground space of the 5 Poison Swamp was really a treasure land for Lin Yi. There was probably no place more suitable for him to cultivate in the world. Whether it was the high concentration of spirit chi or the unique murderous aura of the 5 elements, it was hard to find anywhere else except this 5 Poison Swamp. Chapter 45-52. However, being able to advance 3 levels in a row was not purely because of the unique cultivation environment here. In the process, Lin Yi refined the 10,000 crossing golden elixir fruit that he had previously harvested into a superb golden elixir. Taking it together with his cultivation could have such a terrifying effect. Of course, even so, it was enough to make people's jaws drop. The golden elixir great perfection was only 1 step away from the nascent soul stage, and the golden elixir had just been used up. Although Lin Yi could continue to choose to retreat here, this was different from the previous consecutive breakthroughs. It was not a success that could be achieved through tempering. Because he was the strongest golden elixir stage master who had a perfect breakthrough, and his strength was deep enough, coupled with the unique cultivation environment here, Lin Yi's extraordinary breakthrough was unexpected, but it was still reasonable. It was not as outrageous as it seemed at first glance. However, condensing the nascent soul was different. Strength, opportunity, state of mind, and elixir could not be lacking. Only after all preparations were made could there be a chance of success. Lin Yi had just broken through consecutively. Even if he did not need to specifically stabilize his strength because of the 5 elements killing chi, it was obviously not to the point where everything was ready. It was not impossible to continue to stay here and cultivate, but the cost-effectiveness was not as high as before. Lin Yi knew that blindly cultivating was definitely not the best way to cultivate. Only by relaxing could he get twice the result with half the effort. What's more, there were only 2 months left before the deadline. After deducting the time spent on the long journey, there was not much time left. After instructing the spirit bird, Lin Yi immediately covered himself and the spirit bird with his majestic chi. This kind of thing could not be done when he came in, but now that his strength had skyrocketed by 3 levels, it was no longer a problem. The spirit bird carried Lin Yi and immediately rushed into the 5 Poisons swamp above. Although the resistance of the swamp was great, with Lin Yi's chi and the spirit bird's improvement in the past 3 months, there was no sign of strain at this moment. At this rate, flying out of the 5 Poisons swamp would not be a difficult task. What was worth mentioning was that from the beginning to the end, the 5-elemental murderous aura that resembled a flood dragon completely ignored Lin Yi and the spirit bird. Even when they accidentally touched it, there was no reaction at all. It could be seen that they really treated Lin Yi's true qi as their own. The man and bird traveled through the swamp for about an hour, and Lin Yi could clearly feel that the resistance was getting weaker and weaker. It seemed like they would be able to see the sky again soon. The mysterious space below was still full of light, but Lin Yi couldn't help but feel refreshed. However, that feeling was obviously incomparable to the feeling on the ground. Only by returning to the ground could one truly experience what it meant to breathe freely. This was an innate human instinct. Finally, just as he was about to charge out of the 5-poison swamp, the ghostly voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Stop. Senior, what's wrong?" Although Lin Yi did not know the reason, he hurriedly stopped the spirit bird and looked around vigilantly. He thought that he had been targeted by some dangerous existence, but the jade pendant did not have the slightest intention of warning him. Could it be that the West Mountain Old Sect Master was still guarding above? It had already been 3 months. It was unlikely, no matter how much the West Mountain Old Sect Master hated him to the bone, as an evil cultivator of the mountain opening period. As the number 2 figure of the West Mountain Evil Sect, it was impossible for him to be so idle that he would keep guarding this 5-poison swamp, right? Any normal person would also think that they had died without a corpse left. Could it be that evil cultivators were not only abnormal in terms of their cultivation methods? Even their brains were abnormal? "There's someone above," the ghostly thing said in a deep voice. "What? There's really someone guarding it? Could it really be that old monster of the West Mountain Old Sect?" Lin Yi was shocked. As the mud of the 5-poison swamp could isolate divine sense, even if they were very close to the ground, he still could not sense anything outside at all. But he still couldn't sense the situation outside at all, and he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Senior, could it be that your divine sense isn't affected by this swamp?" "Of course it's affected, but it's only weakened a lot. It's not to the extent where you can't feel anything at all and become a living blind." The ghostly thing laughed. This time it was Lin Yi's turn to be envious. Both of them used the same divine sense, but his divine sense was isolated at will. He could not sense anything from the 5-poison swamp at all, while the ghostly thing's divine sense was only weakened. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. You don't have to look like this. If you want to break through the isolation of the swamp, the strength of your divine sense must reach an amazing level. Only a very few high-level spirit beasts and a small number of top human masters standing at the top can do it. Your current level is too low. You haven't even started the most basic divine sense skills. You're still far away from this step. The ghostly thing explained with a smile. "I see. No wonder I was scanned by the vermilion bird's divine sense when I was in the dense forest of the South Island. At that time, for safety's sake, I clearly smeared the swamp mud on my body. I thought it was because the swamp mud had been smeared on my body for too long, and after getting rid of it, it couldn't block the perception of divine sense." Lin Yi smiled bitterly. That's indeed the case. However, even if the swamp mud didn't get rid of it, you couldn't have escaped the perception of the vermilion bird. Although I have always disliked this guy, I have to say that although this guy is inferior to me in every aspect, it is not inferior to me in the aspect of divine sense, which is what I am best at. The ghostly thing sighed. Lin Yi nodded. He didn't find it strange at all. After all, the vermilion bird was one of the most powerful beings in the spirit beast clan. If it didn't even have this much strength, how would it be able to control those wild and powerful spirit beasts? "Senior, what's the situation up there now?" Lin Yi pointed to the top of his head and asked. What he wanted to know the most now was whether the one guarding up there was the West Mountain Elder. "Listen to it yourself." The ghostly thing snorted. If I could hear it myself, why would I need to ask you, Senior?" Lin Yi was suddenly speechless. Of course, you can't hear it by yourself. But with me here, if I want you to hear it, you can hear it. The ghostly thing smiled mysteriously. Then, it used some kind of magical method, and Lin Yi actually suddenly heard the movement up there. Awesome! It's simply a magical skill. Lin Yi's eyes suddenly lit up as he praised repeatedly. He could not help but ask curiously, "Senior, how did you do it?" Chapter 45-53. This can be connected? Then why haven't I seen you use this trick before? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask. In his opinion, this was a real divine skill. Although the ghostly thing had no combat power in its current state, its divine sense was absolutely unparalleled in the world. If he and the ghostly thing could share their divine sense, it would be equivalent to having a powerful and heaven-defying golden finger. The practical value of this was not small. Do you think this is easy? When the ghostly thing heard this, it curled its lips and said, "This kind of thing sounds like it's not a big deal, but it's very troublesome to actually do it. It will consume a lot of physical strength and real chi that I have accumulated. This time, I just want to let you see it. If it's not necessary, I don't have the capital to be so extravagant." Oh, okay. Lin Yi nodded and then did not say anything more. He began to concentrate on using the ghostly thing's divine sense and began to observe the situation on the ground. If the West Mountain Elder was really guarding there, then it would be troublesome. After a careful exploration, Lin Yi used the ghostly thing's divine sense to lock onto two people on the ground. They were stationed not far from the Five Poison Swamp, but to his relief, the West Mountain Elder was not among the two people. Both of them were strong men with the strength of dragons and tigers. Their strength was not very high. One was in the middle stage of the Gold Core stage, and the other was at the peak of the middle stage of the Gold Core stage. They were sitting on the trunk of a big tree a few miles away from the Five Poison Swamp, monitoring the movements of the Five Poison Swamp from afar. Why did the breath of these two people feel a little familiar? Lin Yi was secretly a little surprised. His memory had always been very good. As long as he came into contact with passers-by, he would more or less have some impression of them. At this moment, sitting on the trunk of the tree and monitoring the Five Poison Swamp, he clearly saw these two people before, but he could not remember for a moment, so he could only continue to observe. "Motherfucker, we are two dignified gold medal escorts, but we don't accept so many good and lucrative jobs. Why were we sent to this shitty place to monitor? From day to night, we look at a pile of broken swamp, and not even a ghost can be seen. I really don't know what is there to monitor. He must be sick in the head." One of the bald men complained indignantly while gnawing on his dry rations. "That's right. We're at the edge of the South Island. If a spirit beast comes out, we'll be in serious trouble. Even if we're lucky enough not to encounter one, the smell is unbearable. It's the first time I've seen such a disgusting swamp. It's colorful, and the smell is so strong. If I continue to endure it, my nose will be ruined." Another black-faced man complained. "Sigh, just bear with it. It's only been a month now. We can only change shifts after 2 months. Chief Escort Long has already ordered us to do so. Even if we pinch our noses until we bleed, we can only do it." The bald man shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Chief Escort Long? Long Kiba?" When Lin Yi heard these words, he immediately remembered that these two people were actually escorts from the Dragon Boat Escort Agency. It was no wonder that he had an impression of them. However, why were these two fellows stationed here? We're really unlucky to have drawn the lot. But speaking of this, Chief Escort Long can't be blamed for it. He had no choice. Who asked the West Mountain Elder to order us to monitor the Five Poison Swamp day and night? Even our Chief Escort Long wouldn't dare to say no in front of such a big shot. The black-faced man clicked his tongue and sighed. Hee. As soon as the big shot opens his mouth, we minions have to run errands. How can we reason with this? I really can't figure it out. Since that Ling Yi jumped into this bullshit swamp, his corpse should have long disappeared. Moreover, it has already been 3 months, and there hasn't been any movement from the beginning to the end. What is there for the West Mountain old sect to be worried about? Must they force us to guard this place? The bald man curled his lip speechlessly. How can we guess the thoughts of such a big shot? We just do what the higher-ups say. Brother, do you dare to disobey them? The black-faced man squinted his eyes and teased. How is that possible? I wouldn't dare even if I had 10 lives. The bald man shrunk his neck and could only comfort himself. Fortunately, there is still 1 more month before this hard work is over. Moreover, we can get a sum of spirit jades as a reward, so it is not a big loss. After 1 month, we brothers will go back and find a good restaurant to have a good meal. Damn it, my mouth is so bland that birds are coming out of my mouth. I only eat some broken dry rations all day long. I don't even have wine to drink. If I had known this would happen, would have secretly brought a few jars over. It's nothing. When we get back, we have to find the best house of drunkards and have a good meal. Io, brother, look at me. I'm so hungry that I've lost so much weight. Even my body is tanned. The black-faced man complained with a bitter expression. Nonsense. You're a black man through and through. How can you get tan like this? What a load of crap. The bald man laughed heartily. Listening to the contents of these two people's complaints, Lin Yi, who was lurking in the 5 Poisons swamp, could not help but be shocked and curse. 3 months had passed, and the West Mountain Elder still didn't give up. He even sent people to guard here and monitor the swamp. This old monster was too damn cautious, wasn't he? Logically speaking, ordinary people didn't know the dangers of the 5 Poisons swamp, but the West Mountain Elder definitely knew it clearly. According to common sense, it was impossible for anyone to come out of the 5 Poisons swamp alive. Now that 3 months had passed, he still didn't give up. However, thinking about all the previous magical deeds of Lin Yi, when he was chased all the way by the West Mountain Elder for the first time, he managed to escape to the interior of the South Island. Moreover, he was able to escape from the South Island unscathed. The degree of danger was no less than that of the 5 Poisons swamp. Since he could escape from death at that time, it seemed understandable that he could do it again. In fact, to be honest, the West Mountain Elder also believed that Lin Yi definitely had no bones left. After all, once he jumped into the 5 Poisons swamp, even he had no chance of survival, let alone Lin Yi's insignificant strength. However, the precedent of Lin Yi escaping from death was there, and the West Mountain Elder had specially investigated Lin Yi's deeds a while ago. He had heard all kinds of legends that had happened to him, for fear that an accident would happen again this time. Chapter 45-54. What are you going to do now? The ghost thing asked with interest. Lin Yi pondered for a moment. In this situation, he had 2 choices. One was to rush out without hesitation. After all, the strength of the 2 dragon boat escorts was so weak that he could kill them in a second, leaving no chance for them to escape. Of course, there was another choice, which was to change his original intention and return to the underground space to continue practicing in seclusion. Anyway, because the 5 Poisons swamp isolated the divine sense, the 2 dragon boat escorts above had not noticed Lin Yi yet. As long as Lin Yi practiced in seclusion for a while, no matter how suspicious the West Mountain Elder was, he would give up one day. At that time, he could come out without being noticed. Of the 2 choices, the latter was obviously safer, but in this way, he would have to change his original intention. There were only 2 months left before the deadline of the task. If Lin Yi stayed, it would inevitably expire. On the other hand, although the former choice was radical, it was actually not risky. With the strength of Lin Yi's current peak of gold core, if he could not even kill 2 small fries in a second, it would be really funny. Forget it, in order to avoid alerting the enemy, I'd better go back to the underground space to continue practicing. I originally planned to prepare to condense my nascent soul after returning to the North Island, but now it seems that I can only try to break through here. Lin Yi rubbed his head and then ordered the spirit bird to return to the underground space. I was going to remind you, but it seems that I still underestimated you. The ghost thing saw this and smiled knowingly. He thought that Lin Yi would directly attack without saying anything. After all, his strength had skyrocketed recently. Any normal person would be full of confidence and would certainly not hesitate to attack the two small fries. But if that was the case, then Lin Yi would really be in trouble. There was something on the two small fries that could not be ignored. It was difficult for ordinary people to notice, but it could not escape the divine sense of the ghost thing. It was the extremely small jade token on the bald man's wrist. This jade token itself didn't have any power. Once it was attacked, it would shatter. Moreover, another jade token that was connected to it would also shatter at the same time. Needless to say, the jade token must be at the headquarters of the Dragon Boat Escort Agency. If Lin Yi made a move on them, the West Mountain Old Sect would immediately sense it. Once the West Mountain Old Sect arrived, even if Lin Yi's strength had skyrocketed, his fate would not be any better than before. I'm not stupid. Lin Yi smiled faintly. With his insight, even if it was his first time connecting with this ghostly thing's divine sense, he would never let go of any detail. He would never be so overconfident that he would directly make a move without observing clearly. A small shrimp was indeed not a big deal, and he could casually trample it to death. However, many things were often defeated by this kind of small shrimp. Although he was now at the consummation of Jin Dan, and his confidence was much more than before, but even so, he did not have the slightest confidence to face the old master of Shishan. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. He had to endure. Returning to the underground space, Lin Yi was not in a hurry to continue his retreat. He was now at the threshold of the consummation of Jin Dan, and there was only the last layer of window paper between him and the Yuanying stage. It seemed that it would break at the first touch. Of course, this was just the appearance. If condensing the Yuanying stage was so easy, then the masters of the Yuanying stage would have been everywhere. Reaching the current stage. There was no effect to continue the retreat, even if he used the murderous aura of the 5 elements to temper his body, it was useless, because it was like a bottle filled with water. No matter how much water was poured into it, it was futile. If he wanted to go further, there was only one way, and that was to change to a bigger bottle. From the Jin Dan stage to the Yuanying stage, the so-called condensing the Yuanying stage, to put it bluntly, was actually to change to a bigger and stronger bottle. If the Jin Dan stage was a pond, then the Yuanying stage was a giant lake. The two could not be mentioned in the same breath. This process was typical of breaking and then building. He must have the awareness of putting himself at death's door, and at the same time, he must make all kinds of preparations. It was not something that could be achieved by blind practice. Lin Yi could only change his original intention now. It was obviously impossible to condense the Yuanying after returning to the North Island. In order not to waste time, condensing the Yuanying stage could only start now, and the first step was to refine the gathering nascent spirit elixir. Thanks to Chu Bubi, Lin Yi now had a whole nascent ginseng in his hand. If he put it up for auction in the market, the whole 5 heaven stage islands would be completely shocked. At that time, Lin Yi's name would be known by everyone, including those top existences who didn't show up in the world. Of course, this was just a saying. Lin Yi would not release the nascent ginseng even if he was out of his mind. Not to mention selling it, he could not even reveal a word about it, otherwise he would be killed. When he took out the nascent ginseng, the surrounding space was suddenly filled with fragrance. This smell almost made Lin Yi mistakenly think that he had returned to the Lufeng forest again. The spirit bird, who was playing not far away, immediately came over and stared at the nascent ginseng with burning eyes. Although it had never seen such a rare thing as the nascent ginseng, spirit beasts were born with the intuition of treasures of heaven and earth, so there was no possibility that it could not recognize it. Do you want to eat this? When Lin Yi saw the spirit bird's staring eyes, he immediately smiled. From the first time he met this bird, it had been carefree and optimistic. It was rare to see this expression. Chirp chirp. The spirit bird repeatedly nodded its head like a human. Its eyes were still staring at the nascent ginseng without blinking, and it was desperately swallowing its saliva. Hee hee, you know what's good for you. Lin Yi scolded with a smile, then he shook his head and said, however, I can't let you eat this thing. Not to mention a whole nascent ginseng, even if I only let you eat a small piece, you won't be able to take it with your physique. Not only will there be no benefits, but you will also suffer internal injuries from eating it. At that time, I won't be able to explain it to Xiao Tao. Chirp 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 chirp. The spirit bird looked at Lin Yi pitifully, then it looked at the nascent ginseng again. In the end, it could only withdraw its head, and it had a dejected look. When Lin Yi saw this, he couldn't help but laugh. What he said was the truth. The nascent ginseng was indeed a rare good thing in the world. Even a little bit of it would be a great supplement for a cultivator of his level. It was enough to make up for several years of bitter cultivation. However, it was also because of this that this thing couldn't be eaten carelessly. Once the supplement was overdone, it would become a life-threatening poison. This was a well-known truth. If he couldn't even refine 2 slices of nascent soul ginseng into a golden pill, then it couldn't be said that Lin Yi's alchemy skill was not good enough, but that his bad luck hadn't passed yet. There was no need to think about condensing a nascent soul for now. It was better for him to wash up and sleep, lest he wasted God's gift recklessly. After preparing all the elixirs, Lin Yi entered the space of the jade pendant and rested for a while. When everything was ready, he took out the divine armament cauldron and began to refine the condensing nascent soul golden pill. After entering the pill recipe, the Shinong medicine cauldron could start to refine the pill automatically. In theory, as long as the Shinong medicine cauldron could bear it, then the possibility of failure was much lower than other ordinary alchemists. The previous near-perfect success rate was proof. Moreover, there was already a successful experience. But even so, Lin Yi still couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Of course, it was useless no matter how nervous he was at this time. The only thing Lin Yi could do was to control the supply of true qi. In addition, he could only rely on the divine armament cauldron that Han Jingjing left for him. The whole refining process lasted for a whole day and night. During the process, it was unknown whether it was because the divine armament cauldron couldn't bear the impact, or because he put in 2 elixirs at once, but the divine armament cauldron frequently buzzed and vibrated. There were even several extremely violent and crazy vibrations, causing Lin Yi to think that the pill furnace was going to explode. After all, the previous refining of the condensing nascent soul golden pill did not have such a situation. But there was no other way. Lin Yi had no choice but to persevere. Fortunately, the Shinong medicine cauldron finally survived to the end. When the voice of Han Jingjing announcing the end of the alchemy sounded on the tablet, Lin Yi's whole body was soaked in sweat. He had been on tenterhooks for a whole day, and the pressure was even greater than when he faced the 5 elements killing qi tempering before. This was really not a job for a human. After letting out a long breath, Lin Yi couldn't wait to open the divine armament cauldron. The inherent unique fragrance of the nascent soul ginseng greeted his nose, but compared with the original smell, it was a little more refreshing. At this moment, the divine armament cauldron was quietly lying in the freshly made condensing nascent soul golden pill. Seeing the condensing nascent soul golden pill formed in the divine armament cauldron, Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. He was taken aback. To be precise, he was surprised and happy. Why are there 3? The condensing nascent soul golden pill in front of him did not have the elixir halo he had imagined. The quality could only be regarded as superior rather than superb. However, the number gave Lin Yi a big surprise. It was not 2 as he had imagined, but 3. Obviously, only 2 pieces of nascent soul ginseng were put in, and there were only 2 other supporting elixirs. In the end, 3 condensing nascent soul golden pills were refined. No wonder there were so many abnormalities in the process. No wonder the quality couldn't reach the desired superb quality. It was already great luck to produce 3 condensing nascent soul golden pills at once. If they were all superb quality, it would be really unreasonable. In any case, it was not a bad thing to have one more condensing nascent soul golden pill. Lin Yi's original bottom line was only 1. Now that he had produced 3, he was overjoyed. With only 1 condensing nascent soul golden pill, Lin Yi was somewhat uncertain about condensing a nascent soul. But now, he had no worries. Next, Lin Yi did not rush to condense a nascent soul. Instead, he meditated in the space under the 5 poisoned swamp. He continued like this for 3 days and 3 nights. After ensuring that his essence, qi, and spirit were all at the peak state, he slowly opened his eyes. After everything was ready, the first thing Lin Yi did was not directly take the condensing nascent soul golden pill. Instead, he dug a hole in the ground, not for anything else, but for a bath. Of course, it wasn't a normal bath. Practitioners at the golden core stage could control every pore on their body, and they could use their pure energy to get rid of even a speck of dust. They could go a year and a half without a bath. Lin Yi rarely had the mood to do this, but he couldn't not take a bath today. He wasn't using water today, but the star ink milk. Chapter 45-56. However, it was a matter of course for Lin Yi. After all, he had obtained a large jar of star ink milk from the Great Fire Lion and the Big Spider. It would be a waste not to use it. Moreover, the Great Fire Lion had said that the star ink milk would have the greatest effect when used for bathing. Now was the time to use it. After pouring the star ink milk all over the pit, Lin Yi jumped in without saying anything. However, there was another plop. Lin Yi couldn't help but stare at the jubilant spirit bird next to him. He didn't expect this guy to be so cunning. It actually jumped in with a satisfied look. Fortunately, the pit that Lin Yi made was not small. Otherwise, it really couldn't fit 1 person and 1 bird. Since the spirit bird wanted to join in the fun, Lin Yi didn't mind at all. Although the star ink milk didn't have a heaven-defying effect on a spirit beast like it, it was not a bad thing after all. Moreover, it wouldn't affect Lin Yi himself. After instructing the spirit bird, Lin Yi immediately sank his qi into his dantian and began to condense his nascent soul. However, the first step to condense his nascent soul was not to take the golden elixir, but to crush the core golden elixir in his dantian. As the name suggested, the golden elixir in the dantian was the source of power for all golden elixir stage masters. No matter what method was used, crushing the golden elixir was an extremely crazy and dangerous thing. If it was light, one would become disabled. If it was heavy, one would die directly. This was not a joke. Although condensing the nascent soul was a process of destruction and reconstruction, for other golden elixir stage masters, even those with extraordinary talent, they would never dare to take such a risk. At most, they would slowly reshape their golden elixir until it finally condensed into a nascent soul. After thousands of years of experiments, this was proven to be the most stable and reliable way to condense a nascent soul. However, Lin Yi obviously didn't intend to follow the crowd. Although this method was stable, the price of pursuing stability was the sacrifice of potential. In this case, even with the help of the star ink milk, it was impossible to become the strongest nascent soul stage master. If he really wanted to stand out, he could only carry out the 4 words, destruction and reconstruction, to the end. The risk of shattering one's own gold core was very high. It could be said that there was a slim chance of survival. If he didn't have so much astral ink milk, Lin Yi would never gamble with his life. But it was different now. This much astral ink milk was enough to ensure that he would remain safe and sound even after breaking his nascent core. Even if it couldn't last for a long time, if everything went smoothly, it should be able to last until he finally condensed his strongest nascent soul. That being said, it was foreseeable that everything would not go smoothly in the process. If there was an accident, no amount of astral ink milk would be able to save his life. Lin Yi rarely took risks, but this time, in order to become the strongest nascent soul, he had no choice but to take this risk. After being provoked by the West Mountain Old Sect Master and the Spirit Beast clan, if Lin Yi didn't take such a risk, then even if he became a nascent soul, he wouldn't be able to fight back. So, he had to fight with his life on the line. He mobilized the vital energy in his body to gather in his dantian and fiercely attacked his gold core, which was the source of vital energy. It was actually not difficult for ordinary gold core experts to break their own gold core. Void core experts only needed to think about it, and even solid core experts only needed to use a little bit of vital energy. However, Lin Yi was different. He had a perfect gold core. With the blessing of the power of the stars, the toughness of a perfect gold core could be said to be unprecedented. If Lin Yi wanted to break his own gold core, he had to hit himself with all his strength. This feeling was no less than 1,000 wild sand explosive fist in one's dantian. If one's willpower was slightly lacking, perhaps they would have fainted from the pain. Puff! Lin Yi groaned and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, the perfect gold core in his dantian had collapsed. The movement in his body was so big that even the ghostly thing, a bystander, was shocked. It had seen many ruthless people, but it was the first time it had seen someone like Lin Yi who was so ruthless to himself. Men really have to be ruthless to themselves. You're awesome. The ghostly thing could not help but be speechless. Senior, you flatter me. It's not too bad. Lin Yi forced a smile. It was really hard for him to still be in the mood to answer at this juncture. As he spoke, Lin Yi once again forcibly mobilized his pure qi, completely shattering the perfect Jin Dan that was already falling apart. At the same time, the star ink milk that was soaking outside seeped into his body through every pore, following his meridians all the way to his dantian. Originally, because the perfect gold core had been shattered, Lin Yi's dantian had also been seriously injured and was on the verge of destruction. The dantian was the foundation of every practitioner. Once the dantian was destroyed, even gods would not be able to save him. Even if he was lucky enough to keep his life, he would no longer be able to mobilize any vital energy and would become a complete cripple. But fortunately, there was the star ink milk. At this moment, the star ink milk that had entered his dantian had just stabilized the dantian that was on the verge of destruction. At the same time, it had also created a unique environment, an excellent environment to condense the strongest nascent soul. At this moment, Lin Yi did not feel the pain brought by the shattering of the gold core. Instead, he had entered a mysterious and wonderful realm. That kind of feeling was as if his body had suddenly become not his own, but had become a bystander with the cold eyes of a bystander. Everything in his body had become clear, and the places that were not so clear before had become clear at a glance because of the star ink milk. The empty realm? Lin Yi's heart was slightly moved. This was a mysterious realm that only existed in legends. He did not expect that he would actually encounter it today. Cultivation was the cultivation of the heart, and it was a process of gradually understanding the principles of the grand Tao of the world. During this process, all cultivators were gradually reacquainting themselves, and introspection was one of the necessary stages. Only by introspection would one be able to understand every single change in one's body like the palm of one's hand, and only then would one be able to truly bring forth one's strongest potential. However, introspection could only be regarded as a basic realm of self-knowledge. One could clearly see every drop of the body. However, it was very difficult to see how to link the body into a whole and how to circulate it freely. If one wanted to achieve this, one could only surpass the realm of introspection and reach the legendary state of emptiness. Legend had it that any practitioner who had reached the empty realm could finally display 100% of their strongest potential and become a legendary master. Lin Yi did not care much about this saying, but one thing was certain. The empty realm was indeed something that could only be encountered by chance. It was not something that could be achieved just because one wanted to. Chapter 45-57. Moreover, the probability was very small. If it was analyzed as a small probability event in the secular world, this kind of thing was equivalent to not existing for ordinary people, and they would not have the chance to encounter it in their lifetime. This was really something that could only be encountered by chance. It was not something that could be encountered by cultivating in seclusion or taking elixirs. If one wanted to reach the empty state, he could only rely on one thing, and that was luck. For Lin Yi, this was purely an unexpected surprise. Lin Yi could not help but secretly guess that this might be related to bathing in the star ink milk. After all, the magical effect of the star ink milk was only known in the world, and it was not even clear. Previously, no one had associated it with the empty state, but it did not mean that there was really no connection between the two. However, Lin Yi did not have much time to be surprised at the moment. The effect of the star ink milk could not last for too long. If he could not successfully condense the nascent soul before its effect faded, the consequences would be unimaginable. The time had come. Lin Yi immediately took a gathering nascent soul golden pill without hesitation. The elixir melted in his mouth, like a refreshing spring flowing from head to toe. There was almost no interval in the middle. The medicinal effect of the gathering nascent soul golden pill immediately took effect. Lin Yi could clearly feel the genuine qi and profound qi in his body slowly condensing, flowing along the major meridians all the way to the dantian. Breaking the golden pill was the first step, gathering the profound qi was the second step, and then the most important third step was condensing the nascent soul. Condensing the nascent soul and condensing the golden pill did not seem to have much difference. The only difference was that the former only needed to break through to the nascent soul stage, while the latter only needed to break through to the gold core stage. But when he really reached this step, Lin Yi knew that the two were fundamentally different. In the end, condensing the golden pill only needed to follow the process. There was not much technical content to speak of. It was just condensing the shape of a golden pill. Even a perfect golden pill was not so complicated. But nascent soul was different, even if everything else was disregarded. It was also extremely difficult to condense a complete nascent soul with profound qi. The golden core was still just a round bead with simple lines, but the nascent soul was a complete human shape. The process of condensing the nascent soul was tantamount to creating a brand new self in the dantian. From head to toe, every part of the body could not be missing. If any part was missing, it would greatly affect the strength of the body in the future. Simply put, the more complete and exquisite the nascent soul condensed when breaking through to the nascent soul stage, the stronger the nascent soul expert would be. On the other hand, if the nascent soul was incomplete, it meant that the nascent soul expert would be at the bottom. Not only would it be difficult for him to break through, but he would also be at the bottom of the pack even among experts of the same level. In order to achieve this, two conditions must be met at the same time. First, it was the perfect environment to condense a nascent soul. Otherwise, if there was even the slightest flaw in such an exquisite work, it would ultimately lead to failure. And the star ink milk just happened to give Lin Yi this unique environment. At the same time, it also gave him a relatively ample amount of time. This was also the origin of the saying that the star ink milk could create the strongest nascent soul. However, this was only an objective external condition. In this world, there was never anything that was absolutely certain. Even taking panacea and panacea might not necessarily work. The star ink milk naturally couldn't guarantee the emergence of the strongest nascent soul stage expert. If one wanted to become the strongest nascent soul, the star ink milk could at most be regarded as an admission ticket. The more critical condition was the second condition, and that was a deep understanding of oneself. As a person from the secular world, Lin Yi naturally had a lot of advantages in this aspect compared to the native cultivators of the Heaven Stage Island. But even so, he still did not have much confidence. Because even the modern technology of the secular world had never been able to really see through the human body. Other cultivators could understand more by simply looking inside themselves. Lin Yi's advantage was at most that he had a more scientific concept. However, what Lin Yi did not expect was that he suddenly entered the state of emptiness. Unexpectedly, he suddenly entered the state of emptiness, and all the things that were unclear before suddenly became clear. If he was only 10% or 20% sure about the strongest yuanying before, then now after entering the state of emptiness, this certainty had increased to at least 60% or 70%. Although it was not 100%, to be able to have 60 or 70% confidence in becoming the strongest nascent soul was already very exaggerated and outrageous in itself. No one would believe it if it was spread out. Even those top experts who had experienced it would not believe it because this kind of thing was simply unimaginable. In their understanding, the strongest nascent soul had always been blessed with luck. Apart from that, everything else, including the star ink milk, could only be auxiliary. At this moment, Lin Yi completely entered a state of selflessness. All of his mind was immersed in his dantian. He used the constantly gathered profound qi to form the nascent soul little by little. At first, it was only a rough outline, but as time passed, this outline slowly became clear. From head to torso to limbs, it gradually took shape. However, when the nascent soul was about to take shape, the molding process stopped abruptly. Lin Yi slightly frowned. Not enough profound qi. The biggest function of the gathering soul golden elixir was to draw out the profound qi hidden in the human body. At the same time, it could also provide profound qi. Under normal circumstances, only one gathering soul golden elixir was enough to condense the nascent soul. Either it succeeded or it failed. There was no third possibility. It was really unprecedented for Lin Yi to suddenly find that he did not have enough profound qi in the middle of molding the nascent soul. There was no other reason. Even if it was a superior nascent soul, it would at most be able to mold some basic organs. However, Lin Yi not only had all the organs big and small, but even the blood vessels and meridians could not be missing. All of these were condensed by profound qi, so it was natural that he did not have enough profound qi. Without any hesitation, Lin Yi hurriedly took the second gathering soul golden elixir. His profound qi once again endlessly replenished his dantian, and Lin Yi once again entered a state of selflessness. The great undertaking of condensing the nascent soul had only just begun. The outline of the nascent soul was relatively easy, but what came after was the truly difficult work. Time passed bit by bit. Lin Yi, who was immersed in the state of selflessness, did not realize how much time had passed. He was not even aware of the changes that had occurred in his body. From beginning to end, all of his attention was focused on condensing the nascent soul. After all, this was the foundation. While Lin Yi was concentrating on condensing the nascent soul, the spirit bird next to him was not idle. It continuously showered its entire body with the star ink milk, not even letting go of a single feather. It was unknown if this made it feel comfortable or if it had some other effect, but in any case, it was never tired. Chapter 45-58. How did your feathers change? Lin Yi's voice came from the side, and his eyes flashed with a never-before-seen charm. If one looked closely, they'd find that he'd changed from head to toe, as if he'd been reborn. His calm and collected temperament had changed a little, becoming extraordinary. There was no doubt that Lin Yi was now a real early-stage nascent soul master. After consuming 2 gathering nascent golden pills and a pool of star ink milk, he finally achieved the strongest nascent soul. Before this, Lin Yi was confident that he could deal with 99% of the late-stage nascent soul masters with his peak gold core strength. Now that he was in the early-stage nascent soul, he could even deal with the peak nascent soul. If it was someone else, even if they achieved the strongest nascent soul, they would only be the strongest of the same level. It was unheard of for an early-stage nascent soul to deal with a peak nascent soul. It was completely a fantasy. However, it had become a reality for Lin Yi. Feeling the earth-shattering changes in his body, Lin Yi did not forget to observe the changes of the spirit bird. During the 10 days when he was condensing his nascent soul, the spirit bird was only soaking in the star ink milk. As a result, it suddenly soared from the late-stage gold core to the peak gold core. This scene was incredible even for Lin Yi. It was not that he had never seen someone who advanced quickly. He himself was a freak, but he had never seen or heard of someone who advanced quickly like the spirit bird. It was already very exaggerated for it to advance from the late-stage gold core to the late-stage gold core in 3 months. Now, it only took 10 days for it to advance from the late-stage gold core to the peak gold core. This kind of thing was simply subversive. Chirp 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 chirp. The spirit bird excitedly shook its feathers at Lin Yi. Compared to the original color, the feathers were not only brighter, but also a lot longer. However, what made Lin Yi helpless was that this guy splashed his head with the star ink milk. There is one more gathering nascent golden pill. Do you want to try it? Lin Yi suddenly said on a whim. He took out the last gathering nascent golden pill and handed it to the spirit bird. Chirp chirp. The spirit bird's eyes lit up and immediately swallowed it. Then, it began to flutter in the star ink milk. Hee hee. You sure aren't being polite with me. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. Although it was a whim, and this gathering nascent soul golden pill was enough to cause a bunch of experts to fight for it, but now it was eaten by a spiritual bird. It was really like a child's play. However, he didn't feel that it was a pity. Anyway, he still had a whole nascent ginseng, and the gathering nascent soul golden pill could be refined at any time. Moreover, this spiritual bird was Huang Xiaodao's spiritual pet, which was also his spiritual pet. Seeing the spirit bird fluttering its wings, unable to extricate itself, Lin Yi smiled and walked out of the pit. He sat down cross-legged on the side. He had just entered the early nascent soul stage. Not only did he need to stabilize his cultivation, he also needed to carefully study the martial skills that he had learned. If he couldn't improve them to the appropriate level, then it wouldn't be easy for him to fight with others in the future. For example, Frenzied Flame 1000 Bursts Fist, Frenzied Flame 8 Trigrams Palm, Frenzied Flame 1000 Kicks, etc., as well as super physical skills and extreme physical skills, these were all things that Lin Yi needed to study. In particular, he had to find a way to combine the latter two with other martial skills to create an enhanced version of the Super Butterfly Subtle Steps and Extreme Butterfly Subtle Steps. This would be a powerful means to fight against enemies in the future. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. Lin Yi was in the middle of his research. Suddenly, there was an excited cry of the spirit bird next to him. Then, he saw it jump out of the star ink milk. The feeling it gave off was completely different from before, and there was a trace of illusory feeling. This was a sign that would only appear when the flying spirit beast reached a certain level. You're already in the nascent soul stage. Lin Yi was suddenly stunned, and he couldn't help but grin speechlessly. He really thought that he had leveled up fast enough. However, compared with this spirit bird, it was like a damn snail. How could this damn bird level up so fast? Chirp 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 chirp. The spirit bird nodded at Lin Yi repeatedly, and its newly increased nascent soul aura was fully revealed. Hee hee, you don't have to be surprised. It's not only your luck to be able to come to this place, but it's also a great luck for it. It's reasonable for it to be able to have this day. The ghost thing interrupted with a smile. That's within reason. Senior, are you trying to tell me that all spirit beasts level up like this? Lin Yi was speechless. If other spirit beasts leveled up at such a terrifying speed, the spirit beast clan would have been invincible a long time ago. That's not it. There's a reason why this spirit bird can level up so quickly. After all, this place is rich in spiritual energy, which is rare in the world. Although there's the pressure of the 5 elements murderous aura, most of it is directed at you. The one that is shared with this guy is negligible. It just picks up the remaining non-aggressive spiritual energy and absorbs it, and it can level up quickly. The ghost thing explained. It's that simple? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. He still felt that it was unbelievable. After all, this was too exaggerated. How complicated do you think it is? Don't forget that there's still so much star ink milk and the gathering nascent soul golden pill that you gave it. In addition, this spirit bird's aptitude isn't that great. It's not strange at all for it to reach the nascent soul stage. The ghost thing didn't seem to mind at all. Isn't it strange that its aptitude isn't good? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. From the ghost's words, it sounded like the aptitude of the spirit beast was able to level up quickly. What kind of strange argument was this? That's right. If it was any other spirit beast here, especially a spirit beast with a better aptitude, even with this unique environment, it might not be able to level up by a few levels. This is because we spirit beasts are different from you humans. You human cultivators level up faster with better aptitude, but we spirit beasts are the exact opposite. The aptitude of the spirit beast race is higher, so it would need more resources to level up. Naturally, it would take longer for them to level up. As for this spirit bird, its aptitude can only be considered to be below average. Naturally, it would level up much faster. The ghost thing explained with a smile. So that's how it is. This is the first time I've heard of it. Lin Yi suddenly understood. The better the aptitude of the spirit beast, the slower it would level up, but there was no doubt that it was powerful. This was indeed different from human cultivators. When the spirit bird gradually calmed down from the joy of leveling up to the nascent soul stage, Lin Yi immediately jumped on its back and told it to go to the upper level of the 5 poisonous swamp to check on the situation. Now it had been a full 20 days. Lin Yi wanted to know if the two people were still stationed there, or if the West Mountain Elder had finally given up. After all, if they wanted to return to the North Island before the deadline, it would really be too late if they didn't leave now. Floating Astronomy, R752. Chapter 45-59. Originally, with the ghostly thing's divine sense, Lin Yi did not even need to go to the surface of the 5 poison swamp. He could just stay at the bottom and let the ghostly thing scan him. However, the 5 poison swamp's divine sense was too powerful. Ordinary people would be completely isolated, and even the ghostly thing would have to spend a lot of effort to go to the surface of the swamp first. Unlike last time, Lin Yi and the spirit bird were both at the nascent soul stage. This time, it was much easier to reach the surface of the swamp. The ghostly thing connected their divine senses to each other, allowing Lin Yi to clearly perceive everything outside. As expected, there were still 2 people standing guard on a tree branch not far from the 5 poison swamp. However, it was not the bald man and the black-faced man from last time. Instead, it was 2 other people. After clearly observing the appearance of the 2 people through the ghostly thing's divine sense, Lin Yi was stunned. This time, it was 2 familiar faces. Brother Yan Ji, those 2 bastards are too infuriating. There are still 10 days before they change shifts, but in the end, they slipped away so early and forced the 2 of us to take the blame. Originally, it was already bad enough that we had to stay here for 2 months. Now, we have to stay here for another 10 days. This is really infuriating. One of them said angrily. Forget it, old Guan. We have to lower our heads when we are under someone else's eaves. Who asked us to be new to the Dragon Boat Escort Agency? We are not as well established as them. It is inevitable that we will suffer some losses. Just bear with it for now. The other person said with a gloomy face. Sigh. Thinking back to the time when we were at the Equal Heaven Escort Agency, the 2 of them were nothing in front of us. If they dared to give me face like this, I will slap them to death. If it wasn't for this unlucky Ling Yi, we wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. With no other choice, we could only rely on the Dragon Boat Escort Agency, letting those snobbish bastards ride on our necks and shit on our necks. Therefore, this job is perfect for me. I want to take a good look at the place where Ling Yi's corpse will be destroyed, and I can vent my anger. That's right. It's good that this guy died. With us brothers guarding here, even if he didn't die, we can let old master come and deal with him. Once the jade tablet is broken, he can come at any time. At that time, we will have made a great contribution. Contribution my ass. Do you know what kind of place this is? This was the 5-poison swamp. Even deities would have to report to the king of hell if they jumped in. How many lives did Ling Yi have? How could he possibly survive after jumping in? This 5-poison swamp was opened by his family? Ha 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 ha. The two people who were talking were actually old acquaintances that Lin Yi had known since he came to the South Continent. They were old acquaintances who had conflicts with each other, Li Yanji and Guan Ziyuan. After committing such a shameless act of treachery, their reputations were completely ruined. Logically speaking, it would be difficult for them to continue working in the escort agency business. However, what Lin Yi didn't expect was that they actually turned around and joined the Dragon Boat Escort Agency. This Dragon Boat Escort Agency really didn't take the usual path. They would accept any kind of trash. But thinking about it, they already had an evil cultivator in charge, so they didn't need more trash. Lin Yi clenched his fists, and he wanted to go up and kill these two bastards. However, when he thought of the sensing jade token in their hands, he immediately retracted his killing intent. As the two said just now, once the jade token was broken, they would come at any time. If the West Mountain Old Sect was really attracted, it would not be a good thing for Lin Yi. With Lin Yi's current strength in the early Yuanying stage, although he wouldn't be as embarrassed as before when facing the West Mountain Old Sect. But with his current strength, it was obviously too whimsical to face a giant evil cultivator in the opening stage. The final result could only be to escape into the 5-poison swamp as before. However, in that case, the West Mountain Old Sect would personally guard the 5-poison swamp and would never give him a chance to escape again. What's more, Lin Yi had only just advanced to the early Yuanying stage, and his strength had not even been consolidated yet. At this time, it was absolutely stupid to go against the West Mountain Old Sect. After thinking about it, Lin Yi returned to the space below. There were still 4 words, the future was long. Lin Yi stood on the high platform again. Because his strength had been qualitatively improved compared to before, the aftermath of the 5 elements murderous qi had no effect on him at all. Only when he was in direct contact with the 5 elements murderous qi, the effect was relatively obvious. With the forcible tempering of the 5 elements murderous qi, Lin Yi soon completely stabilized his strength. However, even so, this kind of day did not last for a few days, because Lin Yi found that the tempering effect of the 5 elements murderous qi was becoming less and less obvious, and the speed of his strength improvement was far less amazing than at the beginning. Lin Yi carefully observed the swamp above his head. Although he had the opportunity to encounter the 5 elements murderous qi standing on the high platform, the density was far less dense than in the middle of the swamp. The probability of encountering it was not very high. It often took more than half an hour to encounter it, and the key was that the strength of the 5 elements murderous qi at the bottom of the swamp was much weaker than that of the 5 elements murderous qi in the middle. The gap between the two could even reach more than 100 times. If he could stand in the middle of the swamp and cultivate, Lin Yi believed that the effect of his cultivation would be as amazing as at the beginning. Unfortunately, this was not realistic. If he wanted to stand in the middle of the swamp, he could only let the spirit bird carry him up. However, in that case, he would have to use his true qi to protect the spirit bird, otherwise, the spirit bird would definitely die. With Lin Yi's current strength, it was not a problem for him to protect the spirit bird. However, it was pure nonsense to say that he could still protect the spirit bird while cultivating. If he really reached the middle of the swamp, even if he went all out, he might not be able to survive for a moment, not to mention that he would have to sacrifice another spirit bird. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yi finally dispelled the idea of entering the middle of the swamp to cultivate. It was too dangerous to do so, and he could only wait until his strength had increased in the future. As for what to do next, Lin Yi had 2 choices at the moment. One was to continue to use the 5 elements murderous qi to cultivate on the high platform. Although the effect was not as exaggerated as before, it was still much better than Lin Yi's simple self-cultivation. However, in retrospect, since he entered the underground space, he had been in a state of extreme hard work. His strength had also jumped from the peak of the middle stage of the Gold Core realm to the early stage of the nascent Soul realm. Now that his strength had been stabilized, it was not impossible to continue to cultivate. He believed that it would not take too long for him to advance to the next level, but it was not enough to relax. In the long run, it might not be a good thing. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.